send out fake whistleblowers. You know?
Sure. I think we don't know exactly what to do with what we have. I think we have bits and pieces. Okay, take this analogy. If you had, you gave a thumb drive to a caveman, would they have any idea what to do with it? They don't know information theory. They don't have a computer to plug it into. They just look at this thing. They probably like try to make a fire with it, right?
Right.
So like, I think that's, you know, maybe you can get some interesting derivative technology. Maybe the nickel alloy titanium, maybe we've done some interesting stuff with that, you know. Maybe there are elements of the Philip J. Corso Day After Roswell, you know, narrative that are true, that some of this stuff has made its way into civil side, you know, infrastructure.
Yeah.
Elements of it, I think there's clearly falsities in that book. Like I don't think semiconductors required, you know, alien tech to you know, their patents of transistors that go way back to the 30s. But by and large, I think we're extremely confused in the Stone Age on what we've retrieved. And so if you find this stuff and it's like Cold War era.
When you say we, who do you?
I mean, it's the U.S. government, the U.S.
The people who know what's going on. Okay.
Yeah. And so like, yeah, I mean, just like America.
Okay.
You know.
I don't know if you meant me or if you meant the guy that's working on the craft.
Well, let me tell you, I got a stash, Danny. Yeah. No, I think like the programs around this stuff. I don't think they know exactly what they're working with or what they're doing. And to me, that explains a lot of you need in the era of Cold War secrecy. You know, we're way ahead of like China and Russia on like retrieving this stuff to begin with. Then like you can keep it super over compartmentalized, right? And like that's fine. It doesn't matter. Then all of a sudden, if like Cold War ends, and then now we're probably back in another Cold War, and it's this multipolar kind of scary thing, and China starts to catch up and like eat our lunch on some of this stuff. Then all of a sudden, you need like some civil side eyes. Like a lot of our best and brightest are not working at like Lockheed or Northrop or like any of these places. So you need to like let certain things out. Yeah. And so that I'm not cynical about, you know, a lot of these whistleblowers. I think they're genuinely wanting to come out. Why they might have some sort of top cover or like why they're not dead, to me might be explained by you got to kind of let the cat out of the bag somewhat, if that makes sense, because you need certain eyes on this thing, because I don't think we've made a ton of progress on many dimensions, you know? I've heard rumors that we have alien reproduction vehicles or, you know, advanced research vehicles that pattern match the UFOs, and we've made them flyable. And then I just don't know. I don't know if that's like, you know, how much progress we've actually made. So, and then even if we have made progress, it's really that fundamental question of like, if we're at parity with China or Russia, then this stuff has to come out somewhat, if that makes sense. And then we live in this like information age too, where it's just like impossible to keep a lid on this shit. And I do think there's these snowball effects where somebody displays a tremendous amount of courage, like David Grush, where he pieces together all this stuff and he, you know, goes forward to the IC Inspector General, gives him 1,000 pages and, you know, offers to say, I'll go in a skiff with anybody and I'll you know, show you where the bodies are buried and I can give you the exact addresses of the, you know, facilities and stuff. And he does this in front of Congress. And I think if you're on the program, you're somebody like Jake and you're seeing that, you're like, this guy's really courageous. And it it inspires you. You know, it's like the Bannister effect. Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile. And then 10 people broke the 4-minute mile like 2 years after him. I think you see somebody go a little, you know, you've had like moral qualms about what you've been doing already. And you see somebody like, you know, take it this far and you're like, okay, well, I know a little bit more and I could probably help with this effort. I'm gonna go a little farther. And so, yeah.
I can see the problem though, which you alluded to in that conversation with Jake, that if all of this super high-tech secretive war stuff that we're working on is so compartmentalized and not available to even people in the highest levels of the military and, you know, the highest generals and the president. Like, if we get into a war, I'm sure that Russia and China, under their dictatorships, they're going to be able to get shit done instantly, and they probably don't have this problem of compartmentalization and keeping secrets from their actual government.
Yes.
Right? So, like, that's a problem.
That's a huge problem from a national security standpoint. I mean, read the 3-body problem, and like that's how it goes down. It's like you see like a scientist that, you know, you're the CCP, you're the, you know, the PLA, and you see a scientist like working on some really interesting neutrino info transfer. You have something like really far out, crazy
Yeah.
stuff that like you don't have.
Yeah.
You just knock on their door. You say, we're relocating you.
Yeah.
You're working at this base. That's
Uh-huh.
it. That's the way it goes. That's not the way the U.S. The U.S. is like, you have these competing factions. You have all this, it's just, it's way more of this kind of uncoordinated octopus. Mm-hmm. And
Right,
so,
exactly. That's a good way of putting it.
so I think the reason, I think a lot of these NDAs that people have signed in the aerospace context to work on this stuff in the past are extremely threatening. And they're, really scary retributions that could occur hypothetically for a lot of these people.
Yeah.
And then I do think whatever legacy programs like don't want anything to come out are on their back heels. And they're like, some limited disclosure has to occur. And I think they're kind of like, we don't quite know what to do here. And I think my hope is there are people on the inside who are a little more like, we need basic ontological truths to come out. It's like nuclear stuff, right? Like you have nuclear physics, you have programs all over the country. It's physics, it's open source. Ontological truths, the idea is that there could be bodies and crafts. Like people need to know this shit. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And then, anything that, any trade secret that could immediately be weaponized or is low barrier to entry, blow up the world kind of stuff, that obviously should be classified.
Yeah.
And we just need to think about it reasonably through those lenses. But I do think there are people on the inside who are just dogmatically pro secrecy because it's like this like cargo cult bureaucracy thing. It's just like they don't understand how to be any other way or something.
Yeah, I mean, the most frightening thing is that if this rogue government that's like has its own air force, military, navy, whatever, that has all this power and has this technology that could essentially like beat any world government's technology as far as like war or whatever it is, like, and if they go rogue and if they decide to start a war against the rest of the world, like that's the worst. That seems like the scariest thing regarding these companies that have this stuff, because what's going to stop them from keeping more secrets from you and just taking this technology and exponentially gaining more information and revealing more insight into it and understanding more about the universe and keeping that shit from the U.S.
Right. Turns into like a breakaway
what
civilization.
a breakaway military.
Breakaway
right?
military.
A breakaway. It's not a country.
Well,
but it's like a company that's more powerful than any country.
I did find it very interesting that like Matthew Livelsberger, the Green Beret, he blows up a Cybertruck in front of the Trump Towers. So it's like this weird message or something.
Symbolic, yeah.
Felt kind of symbolic, like some sort of meme warfare thing. And then the email he sends to Sam Shoemate, who goes on Sean Ryan, is all about Chinese gravitic propulsion drones, which I think is China is not flying with impunity with, electrogravity propulsion. Like that's game over, right? Like that's like we're in the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's been going on for 3 months or whatever. Like that. It's not that. But maybe it's sort of a little bit of a shot across the bow, depending on what force was behind that. Because clearly he was dealing with a lot of trauma, PTSD, and I think was like a good guy in his private life. But like, what leads somebody who's like that to do that and to send that email? And I did speak to a Green Beret about this, and he was like, maybe this is a way to let out some of the gravity stuff that we have made breakthroughs with. So think about it like this, like maybe you're sending a little shot across the bow again to Elon, to Trump, to civil side government, and you're saying we've got some harder core shit that you don't have.
Yeah.
And again, this is deep conspiracy. I would hold this very kind of loosely, low probability, but it goes to the point that you've made. And then I don't know where they are technologically and if they even have the power to sort of flex and do that. But I do think that aerospace has some pretty advanced technology that
those drones over New Jersey, they didn't seem like anything special. Like they seemed moving like regular drones. Like they weren't moving at light speed, or like they weren't moving like Tic Tacs making sharp turns. They were just like floating around like normal quadcopters.
They were floating around for longer periods of time than you'd ever expect, like hours and hours at a time. They'd stay stationary, so they were exhibiting some kind of exotic effects with the kind of winds and stuff, but like generally. And then I would make a huge distinction between a lot of people were seeing orbs and like other weird stuff, and then there were like the fixed wing drones that looked like they were meeting FAA regs, which were obviously human. And so I would make a clear distinction between those two things. I would also make a distinction between the stuff showing up at nuclear bases, which if you know Robert Hastings' work,
Yes.
that looks more, I don't want to say paranormal because that sounds quacky, but that looks more like of the UFO, the classic
Sure.
UFO variety. You
Right.
have to classify it.
I'm
probably
just
as
saying
that.
the New Jersey stuff didn't seem like anything near the UFO variety.
No, I agree with that. A
Yeah.
lot of it, and then but you had Salem nuclear plant right there, and you had stuff showing up there, and at Picatinny Arsenal, right? You know, stuff was showing up.
Right. I think it was definitely our government or one of our government contractors that was in charge of that. I don't know what they were doing.
But did you hear the audio of Wright Patterson's like comms links were down, like their power was out for like a few hours? Like that to me is classic Robert Hastings UFOs and nukes, and that was happening around that time.
what happened with Wright Patterson? I thought they just had to like shut down the runway or something for.
No, I think the power was out for a couple of hours.
At Wright Patterson, the
Yeah.
power was out.
I believe either the power or all comms were down for a little bit. Yeah, and there's
Can you
audio.
look this up? Can we
yeah,
find
we
this?
should look it up. Yeah.
Let's find out.
Yeah, I think it's on Twitter. Is where.
What would we search? How? What,
Do Wright Patterson communications outage.
Wright Patterson drone.
And there's
outage.
audio.
Wright Patterson Air Force Base experienced a closure of its airspace for about 4 hours late Friday night into early Saturday morning due to the sightings of small unmanned aerial systems, drones, in the vicinity of the base. The base's airspace was closed as a precautionary measure to ensure the safety of the installation and its residents. No property was damaged or residents harmed during the incident. So they closed the airspace.
Okay, and I guess maybe there wasn't a comms outage. It was like it was precautionary because there was stuff flying around it. Right, Pat.
Right. Huh. Yeah, I did hear like a some sort of radio comm thing too, where they were talking about like shutting down the airspace or.
I have a crazy one for you. So in 2010, after Robert Hastings wrote his book, which was 2008,
Yeah.
F.E. Warren experienced an outage for.
What's F.E. Warren?
F.E. Warren is a nuclear base in Wyoming.
Oh, okay.
And it experienced an outage for, they said 59 minutes, but Robert Hastings did back channeling and it was 24 hours. And
What?
President Obama was briefed on this. Now, do F.E. Warren outage Atlantic? F.E. Warren, outage Atlantic. And you'll see that this was reported on by like mainstream media. And I don't know, go to
Atlantic
the
broadband.
no, the Atlantic, like the periodical or whatever.
Oh, and the Atlantic magazine.
Yeah, Atlantic magazine.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
okay.
Magazine.
Atlantic magazine.
Yeah.
Is it a power outage?
Just look.
Yeah,
okay.
failure shuts that
Third
third
one
article.
down.
Yeah,
you go.
exactly. So okay, this is really crazy. So President Obama was briefed on this, and Hastings back-channeled with this guy, this retired missile technician named John Mills.
Yeah.
And he back-channeled with some missile security officers on site, and were like, there was a Tic Tac flying around all over the base, and that caused the outage.
Is this like
And-
one of the Minutemen missile silos, like where they have those underground ICBMs?
I know Malmstrom is. I don't know if F.E. Warren is.
okay.
Maybe. But this is what's crazy is you can even see in the article, at the top of the article, engineering. So power is crossed out.
Why?
And then it goes into engineering failure. I think it's covering their ass. I think they don't want it to seem like it was attributed to a UFO or to a Tic Tac or whatever, which, again, Robert Hastings backtracked. And by the way, I should say, I think, I was wrong about the Wright Pat thing. So I don't want to, like, conflate. Like, this is another thing that I think is very legit. But, I mean,
that's huge when they shut down a nuclear
dude,
base.
Obama was briefed. Yeah.
Right, that's big. That's a big deal.
No shit. Yeah, and then you're back-channeling with these guys who say that it's attributed to a Tic Tac flying around in the airspace.
Right.
And then they're crossing out power and they're making it seem like it's an engineering thing.
What did I say? 3 other LCCs were successfully restarted. The suspect LCC remains offline. What is an LCC?
Let's see here. The LCC, Launch Control Center.
Oh, okay. So the Launch Control Centers.
Yeah, they lost comms. Like they couldn't launch the thing if they
They
wanted to. Which is a
interrogate
huge
each
national
missile
security
in
issue.
sequence. So if they begin to send signals out when they're not supposed to, receivers on the missiles themselves will notice this and send out error codes. It left 50 missiles in the dark. The missiles then restarted one of the LCCs and begin to normally. Wow, dude, that's freaky.
It's really freaky. And then you're doing, Hastings, who I think is a very honest actor, is doing back channeling with these guys, and they're like, there's Tic Tac flying around, and that's what caused the outage. And then I think one of them faces kind of career reprisals as a result of this back channel with Hastings and stuff.
Yeah.
So, and then you have that power is crossed out, and engineering is
That's
put up.
weird.
It's
Why
like
did
the
they do that?
live editing is shown on the Atlantic article
That's
to like
because
cover it up.
we're on the Brave browser. The Brave browser shows y'all. I wonder if it shows it in Chrome.
It does show it in Chrome
Oh,
too.
it does too?
It does
Okay.
because
Oh,
I
okay.
put it in my documentary on Hastings.
Oh,
but,
okay.
So anyway, so the Wright Pat thing, that is interesting. That I guess it sounds like they were just incursions on Wright
Yeah.
Pat, and then they ended up shutting the airspace down as
Yeah.
a result of that. It wasn't a comms link failure, so that's my bad. But
I think they were getting ready
They're-
for the Eagles to win the Super Bowl, so they had to like start figuring out Philadelphia. They
yeah.
knew people were going to be looting and terrorizing the whole town. It was going to turn into Afghanistan for a week. After.
That's funny. Exactly. But that just goes to the point that, like, if these things are showing up around sensitive military sites,
Yeah.
it points to the nuclear connection. It points to this more generalizable three-body problem narrative where they're not just showing up at nuclear sites, they're showing up at advanced science research sites and the most sensitive military sites. And that was the case with the New Jersey drone. The whole New Jersey drone, the name New Jersey drone is a psyop because they
Yeah.
weren't just in New Jersey. They were at Lake and Heath.
They were in Florida, too?
They were in Florida. They were everywhere. And they weren't just drones. The drones were drones. When the shit you could see that were taken down occasionally, that was blinking red and green because they're meeting FAA regs. Obviously drones.
Yeah.
Like clearly those were drones. In fact, even the White House statement on the drones, the press secretary.
What Trump said?
Trump says it's very weird, very strange. It's not adversary, and they're going to the they're coming from the garage, and we know where the garage is. So that's interesting,
That's
right?
weird, yeah.
And
the way
that-
he talks is just so confusing sometimes.
It's very confusing, but then the press secretary tries to minimize it and say there's nothing to see here. She says, "Oh, they were FAA approved. They were research drones."
Yeah.
See, that begs a question. If you were given orders by the president who told you we will clear this up immediately, because he was asked this as soon as he was elected, and he goes,
Yeah.
"What happened there? We have to figure that out." And he like orders somebody to figure it out.
Yeah.
So those were your orders. You're saying we have FAA research drones. What were they researching? If it's a prosaic, easy thing to explain away,
Yes.
you say it.
How come no one
If
asked
it's
that?
not, if it is not, then you don't say it. So
Yeah.
I think it points to some more exotic answers. Again, I don't know. You have to think probabilistically about all this stuff, and I'd be open
Right.
to it not being UFOs. But like,
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of evidence. Also, Southport, New Brunswick, Duke Energy Plant, there was UFOs showing up there too. So like
So drones or UFOs?
UFOs.
Meaning what? What do they look like?
They look more like these plasma orb style
Really?
things. Yeah.
Like the Bledsoe orbs?
More like the Bledsoe orbs. Like those look very different than these like fixed wing, like
Yeah.
they're just different.
Okay.
That's why the whole thing's aside. It's like not New Jersey and it's not just drones.
Yeah.
It's a whole host of stuff. And it's again, you get into these weird kind of questions of like,
Were they
in the
trying
case
to
in which
distract? Were they trying to run a simulation? There's so many like
so many
options.
questions.
Yeah.
But also in the case in which it wasn't ours. Say in the case in which there were real UFOs, like not ours, not prosaically explained UFOs.
Yeah.
You would probably put some stuff out to research it.
Yeah.
You put some of our stuff out.
Right,
So it's
right.
like really murky, and it's way more charismatic and easy and goes viral much quicker to be like there's a loose nuke on the eastern seaboard.
Right.
That will go viral way faster than like it's actually a whole host of things. and
Right,
it's kind
right,
of
right.
complicated.
It's not that
It's more
interesting.
new- yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right.
exactly. So I think that's kind of what happened, and that's why like if there were psyops around explaining things away, I think that's why it was so charismatic. But then you talk to like the nuclear, support teams, the emergency teams, Nest or whatever. All of those guys were like, no, there's nothing there. Like,
Yeah.
nobody was like being evacuated. And, like,
Right.
so it clearly wasn't that. So it's weird.
Dude, with like all of this stuff that's been happening lately with the news cycle and all the crazy things that have gone on in the last 6 months, like from Trump almost getting killed on live TV
Yeah.
to like a week later, that story is completely dead. And then we have like the Olympics debacle, and then we have like the debates, the election, and all this, the New Jersey drones. Like there's like so much stuff happening on top of the fact that people are more awake now than ever
Yeah.
of all the fuckery that's going on with like not only just the media trying to subvert stuff with advertisers, but with the government trying to subvert stuff. Like people more aware of the word psyop now than ever. I'm sure if you did a Google trend on that word psyop, it's probably skyrocketing in the last year.
For sure.
So like, I wonder if the government came out tomorrow and said, yes, we made a deal with these alien civilization and they're here, we have their UFOs. I wonder legitimately what percentage of people would believe that or just run the other way.
This is such an important thing you're bringing up because already with the Jake Barber piece, the UFO world has cleaved off and is on another island of reality from mainstream media has no idea who Jake Barber is. Unfortunately, it sucks because it's such an important story. But like, because it's a hard pill to swallow, we're talking about psionics, mind-matter connection, egg-shaped things showing up in our airspace. Like, it's a lot to stomach all at once.
Yes.
And it breaks the brain of these normie legacy people who like aren't down these rabbit holes that you and I are down because we've spoken to a lot of people. And so it's this really important ontological question where it's like people are like, we need disclosure. I'm like, if you walked into a hangar and were shown a UFO, you walked into the UFO, it wouldn't change your life at all. You'd have no idea what you were looking at. And it would beget all sorts of other questions that you'd have that wouldn't be answered upon walking into the UFO or whatever. So disclosure isn't some file that's going to come out where it's like this, these are, facts or whatever. I do think if Trump or Tulsi or like one of these people with like, serious, credentials in the government, like cabinet level credentials, or even from the past cabinet level credentials, says there's a there, I do think that's like a step function up as far as disclosure. Like that's progress. Mm-hmm. But it's gonna be this. You're dealing with people's core belief systems, and it's gonna be this sort of broken, jagged process. It's not gonna be this like overnight, like we have disclosure. Like people in our world, or in, I don't know where you lie, but in a lot of my world or whatever, they're like, we've had disclosure. Like so much has come out outside of 8K. Imagery with like the president standing next to a UFO. Yeah, it's like we've kind of given a lot.
If they wanted to make it available, if they wanted to do disclosure, think about it. They're doing it the right way.
Right.
No one's losing their mind.
Sure.
Religion is not burning to the ground. People aren't quitting their jobs and like shooting. It's not turning into Mad Max out there. Or, like they are doing it the right way. Although like, kind of what I was alluding to is like with the distrust of media and government now and people being aware of the deception, the strategic deception that they are capable of.
Yep.
If the government was to say, yes, there's aliens, we have them, we have a saucer, right?
Yep.
There would be a huge chunk of people who think automatically if they're saying that, the opposite must be true.
Yeah, of course. And I understand that skepticism and I have a reflexive allergic reaction to the government telling me anything as well. And I would just say, just because you think somebody has an ulterior motive, because a lot of people in the UFO world have a fucking ulterior motive, doesn't mean everything they're saying is wrong.
Right.
Maybe they're doing some weird controlled opposition thing. Maybe they're doing something where they want to make money and inherit some equities outside of the government.
Yeah.
Maybe they're I can give you 50 million reasons as to why somebody would say some shit about UFOs and, claim to come from an authoritative background that aren't pure. That doesn't mean the facts they're saying are wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think, a lot of these guys, like, I think the prima facie stories of a lot of these guys are just fully right. They're just correct. And people just can't stomach them. They can't, they're like, it just breaks their brain. It breaks their priors. And, yeah, it's tough, and
that's why you think mainstream media hasn't reported on Jake's story?
Yeah, I think it breaks. I think they don't know how to process it. I think they have no idea how to. The computer, it like breaks their computer. I mean, dude, those guys are mind controlled. I mean, like
those guys want money though.
They want. That's true. They do want money, but they also, have certain commercial interests and like are, connected to like various. I mean, you're seeing what's happening with Mike. Mike Benz is reporting on all this like USAID, back channel shit with like every legacy media.
I am so shocked that YouTube's letting that shit go.
It's wild. It's wild that they're letting it go. But I think we've crossed the Rubicon of sorts. But like,
I hope so.
We don't know who's making calls at these studios. But look at like COVID. Like for a year, I mean, even in like I think 2022, the New York Times published a steel manning of the like zoonotic origin of COVID story. It's like, give it up, guys. It's so stupid. Like you literally have to, it takes the probabilistic thinking of a child to realize there are wet markets all over China. Why was it the one wet market
right
6 miles next to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is studying spike proteins added on to like a basically modification of SARS and how they can create a pandemic. Like, give me a break. Like,
there's an outbreak of chocolatey goodness in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
John Stewart
Dude,
said
that
it
was
best.
the best.
Hilarious. And that just gets so simple, right? But they don't. They're overeducated. They've lost their instinct. They don't actually think about any media story critically at all. I hate to say, I come from this world. I went to Columbia, and like I know a lot of these people. I love them. They think I'm crazy now or whatever.
Yeah.
But they don't actually do thinking around like they hear a story and ideas are fashion statements, and they don't want to look bad at the water cooler, at Condé Nast or wherever they are. They don't want to and they're snarky. And if you watch, I interned for, The Daily Show back in the day, and like I thought they were.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Jon Stewart was a total bulwark against neoconservatism back in the day. That was very healthy and like amazing. And now he's just they're out of touch, man. And like you have, these correspondents go out to these like MAGA rallies and they just like make fun of them and like they're snarky. And I was probably guilty of it. I was anti-Trump in 2016, and like I thought he was kind of crazy, and like
I was the same way.
And I was like, these states don't understand. These red states don't understand what's good for them. Like what. And then my now belief is like the more like you go through like the liberal arts, like Ivy League education, the more you lose touch with your real instincts about reality. And your worldview and like mental models on things are actually like really wrong. You're like way off. And it's couched in this veneer of sophistry and of sophistication. And so it sounds really smart, but it's actually really stupid. And it's wrong.
I try my hardest to be open-minded about things and look at things from multiple angles, but like every single big topic like UFOs or ancients, Graham Hancock's a big one.
Yeah. They hate him.
He's like, no, they fucking love him.
Well, it's either one or the other. He's so polarizing.
It's so polarizing, and the lack of open-mindedness and ability to form independent thoughts outside of the comment bubble is astonishing.
Yeah, no, it's crazy, and it's an age-old trope in history of this amateur gentleman journeyer who has correct instincts, is outside of the priestly citadel of experts, and then gets proven right. Heinrich Schliemann was this German businessman that was laughed at forever because he thought the ancient city of Troy, in the Peloponnesian War, written about by Homer and Thucydides, was actually, that wasn't mythology. Like, that was actually a real place. And then he goes out and he finds it in Anatolia in the 1870s. And we have now have tons of corroboration. That's now consensus.
Right.
Luis Walter Alvarez thought that, an asteroid impact took out the dinosaurs 66 million years ago.
Right.
And in their case, they actually were extremely credentialed. Luis Walter Alvarez, the father, was, in the Manhattan Project, very involved with Oppenheimer, and so. Yeah. But he was this, he was out of his domain, right? He was an archaeologist, but he was right? And now you have Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson. They're saying the same thing about Younger Dryas impact.
Yes.
Younger Dryas impact. They're also pointing to mythology, just like Heinrich von Schliemann did in the case of Plato and dates around Plato. But they also have tons of archaeological evidence, like great archaeological evidence that. There was an airburst from the Taurid meteor stream around that time. Yep. And they're just not being taken seriously. And my money's on them. My money's not on the Citadel. Yeah. So it's reflexive bad thinking. Mm-hmm. And there's a great book by this guy Sam Arbesman. It's called The Half-Life of Facts. And at any point in history, we were wrong about 50% of the conventional wisdom at the time. or roughly, right?
Okay.
Like, so we're probably wrong about 50% of what we know now.
Yeah.
So if you are going around being this like Michael Shermer style or Richard Dawkins style skeptic, Neil deGrasse Tyson, like
Yeah.
we know everything, you are being ahistorical. You're engaging in bad thinking. Unless you can point to some percentage of current knowledge that you think is wrong, you're like an extension of the Borg.
Yeah.
You're the thought police for
Yeah.
the conventional wisdom, and you're probably wrong. So yeah, I like to systematically go through the anomalies because I think that they're tells on what the next scientific paradigms are. Like if you look at, black body radiation was discovered by this German guy in the 1860s. We couldn't. That was the fact that would create this ultraviolet catastrophe. It was this guy Gustav Kirchhoff. We couldn't understand that until Max Planck and the quantum revolution in the 1900s.
Oh,
the
yeah.
Mercury, the orbit of Mercury wasn't understood in the Newtonian context, and we needed general relativity to explain it. So when you see an anomaly, like a UFO, or like Washington Scablands, like impacts or whatever,
Right,
that
right.
you might represent, the Younger
Yeah.
Dryas thing. You have to systematically look at the anomalies. You can't ignore them.
Right.
Because they lead to new science. This is the Scientific Revolutions 101. Thomas Kuhn wrote about this in The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. The anomalies bring in the new paradigm.
Yeah.
So what I think you're doing, and what I love to do, is like
Yeah.
talk to people on the fringes. And just because you're talking to them doesn't mean you agree with everything they say.
Right.
You're not platforming
We have
them.
the benefit of talking to the people on the fringes and the people in the center of the academic institutions.
Totally.
Which they each one some of them, the people in the academic institutions are in a bubble. They're not talking to the people in the fringe every day.
Yep.
And same thing most of the time with people on the fringes.
Yep.
And like the way I explain like the whole Flint Dibble Graham Hancock thing is like, I completely understand how Flint Dibble, who his dad named him Flint because he's an archaeologist, and his dad's probably an archaeologist,
Yeah.
who spent his whole life studying archaeology, reading the boring books, doing the boring shit, traveling all over,
Yeah.
digging through the mud and pulling stuff
You're
out
threatened.
his whole life, and nobody knows who the fuck you are.
Yep.
Then Graham Hancock comes along, writes some crazy fucking book, and becomes a super celebrity and makes
Totally.
tons of money
Totally.
going on Joe Rogan all the time. I'm gonna be super jealous and resentful of that guy too.
100%. And
I'm not gonna go as far as Flint Dibble did. Let's make that very clear.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the shit
Well-
he did was really terrible in my opinion.
And he was like lying about it. Some certain slides were up on that Rogan
Yeah.
episode that were just like wrong.
And not
Like,
only that, but like, and this is a super unpopular opinion, and I will get completely destroyed in the comments for saying this, but I think Flint killed him on that debate
Hancock.
without having the ability of being able to Monday morning quarterback and see, okay, he was wrong about a lot of stuff, because he did do some dishonest things by like, he was very confident in saying things that were quite literally wrong after people were able to go back and review the stuff, and Graham was actually able to go back over the podcast and find out like, okay, like you're completely wrong about the number of ships
Right.
or any of this other stuff that you were talking about. But like,
Right.
but like I learned a fuckload from Flint during that podcast.
Yes.
And he was able to fill in the gaps of stuff that Graham didn't really understand during that podcast.
Totally.
I feel like, and I feel like even Rogan during that podcast was siding with Flint
Sure.
on things. Like he was like, Graham, don't you think that looks kind of natural to me?
Yeah,
Graham?
yeah, yeah.
And Graham was like, no.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's neither here nor there. I think that, like, I thought he did a great job, but what I don't like is how he went on Twitter afterwards and be like, oh, do you see how much I kicked Graham's ass during that podcast?
Right,
Subtweeting
right.
every tweet that Graham did, looking like a complete douchebag.
Totally. Yeah.
But like, so I guess my point is, like, I understand how Flint feels, why he feels the way he feels.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah,
why
yeah.
people in academia feel the way Flint feels. And I see how there's sort of like a rift between these two groups, and just like combine that with the way modern media works. Like, podcasting is the number one form of information in the world now, right? And like people are more interested in the fringe stuff because it's exciting.
Yep.
And it's more sensational. And I think, long way of putting it, but academics get resentful of that, and it's created this sort of like this dichotomy, if you will.
Totally. And but I think there's value in it, to your point with Flint
Yeah.
Dibble, where it's like you need to stress test the really bold, grand, new ideas and
totally.
theories.
Yeah.
And I think science is a process. It's like, you have skepticism and dogmatism, and it's a Scylla and Charybdis, and you want both. And I think having debates like that are really good. But I'm always partial or sympathetic to quote unquote platforming the people with the bold grand ideas, where like some of the stuff might be wrong semantically,
Yeah.
but they're directionally correct on like in like a big way that's exciting, versus these guys that are just defending the modern paradigm, because I don't think that gets us anywhere. Like, yeah, like I agree.
Right.
Like
No,
Darwin
yeah.
is like a locally useful theory. Like I don't think like Darwin's like
theory.
fake.
Right.
It's a theory, and I think
gravity's also a theory.
gravity's also a theory, totally. But I think it's also useful in a scientific. You know, I wouldn't like throw it out at all. Like these things are like extremely useful. Gravity's a great example because there are like many anomalies with it, both
Right.
on a macroscopic level with dark matter, and on a microscopic level with it's irreconcilable with the other forces on a quantum level, and electrons don't exhibit gravity in the same way other
Super
macroscopic
wild.
objects do.
Super wild shit.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I think I'm always partial to let's like systematically talk to the people with the bold theories and then stress test and come at them and try to negate any parts of their thinking that are kind of flimsy,
Right.
but like really take seriously their ideas, especially when they're driven. I think the difference between Dibble and Graham Hancock is like one is driven more by intuition and this like life purpose mission thing,
Yeah.
and in our modern day that's seen as inherently BS or something, whereas the other person's like came up through the system,
Yeah.
and like that's just seen as more valid. And I would
Yeah.
say if you're like you
Which
feel like
is-
hermetically called to a thing, you're going to be extremely motivated. You're going to find out all sorts of stuff. And we would not be talking about Göbekli Tepe if it weren't for Graham Hancock.
Exactly.
And so the conventional wisdom on like how old civilization is would be the classic Mesopotamia was the cradle of civilization. So like who's had more of an impact just based on that?
100%.
It's Graham Hancock.
Even Flint said when he was in here, he goes, Graham inspired a lot of people that I know that are now academic archaeologists and
There you
devoted
go.
their career to this stuff.
There you
So,
go.
yeah.
Totally.
So, yeah, again, and I don't even know what the actual objective was of that debate other than to like disprove Graham's ancient civilization idea.
Debates like this are tough.
Yeah, they are.
Because like often it's like I did like this informal debate with like Michael Shermer.
I saw that.
And, like,
who was the guy that he debated?
Who
Michael Shermer? You had Michael Shermer and who?
No, it was just me and him.
Oh no, but
This
I saw
was-
one on your channel with
Oh no, Mick. That was Mick West.
Mick West,
and
that's
Merrick
who it
von
was.
Rennenkamp.
Oh, okay,
and
okay.
and that was a tough one too, where it's just you have the skeptics who I think do provide this service, and I even came out thinking, okay, like Mick actually, has some interesting debunks in these certain areas. I'm gonna like hold some of these videos in lower probability. Like actually, one of my takeaways is like video evidence isn't the kind of Archimedes lever for disclosure in general.
Right.
Like it's not the thing you want to hinge your belief on at all.
Right.
Because like they're all kind of murky and like not great. Although I think maybe on the margins Merrick won the debate, but I think the classic thing with like skeptic versus pro when it comes to these really kind of hard to answer questions is like the pro people have all these reasons as to like why it's anomalous, and then the anti people they just they sit on these kind of like, oh, it's law of large numbers, or it's
Yeah.
Occam's razor, or it's it's like these like rules of thumb
Yeah.
that like are just it's like kind of lame and
Yeah.
like provocative
Yeah.
and like you're not actually looking at the data. Like finally I think Mick West has read UFOs and Nukes by Robert Hastings because it's such an important data set when it comes to UFOs, but
What'd he say about it?
can't say anything. There's nothing he
What?
can say because he gets like, how are you going to go at these guys? You can't go at their credentials.
Yeah.
You're going to call them liars, like they're on the PRP program.
right.
It's kind of hard. So like you end up with this like two trains passing in the night in the debates where it's like one side has a data set and the other side just won't agree that the data set is legitimate. They're just like, it's survivorship bias, it's file drawer issues, it's
Yeah.
you're a liar, you're a grifter or whatever. But like, look at the data. Look at that. What do you mean?
Right.
Like I've met
Right.
a lot of these guys who've seen this
Yeah.
stuff at nuclear sites, and it's like some of them have maintained Q clearances for
Yeah.
years after they've seen this stuff. Like, and then at that point, it's like, I don't know what to tell you. If you're not going to like believe, if you're not going to like read the book, which is a 580-page book, extremely dry and it's almost boring.
Really?
Because it's so rigorous and good and meticulously done. Like Robert Hastings has like an eidetic memory. And so like you're either going to read the book and like engage with it or you're not. And if you're not, then like I don't know what the debate is about.
Right. What do you make of Elon not being impressed or not being interested in this stuff?
I find it really interesting. You know, Starlink is just like an optical group of, you know, satellites, and it's the biggest, you know, optical, you know, group. But and then
Dude,
obviously
the
they do
satellite-
RF communication.
Have you seen like the videos of all the satellites that we have surrounding the Earth? It's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy. Especially with Starlink, it's just blowing it out of the water. I mean,
Yeah.
it's everywhere. And they have I think it's Star Shield is like the dual use kind of, you know, optical or whatever. But so you hear that these things, the UFOs are like picked up by like other sensor modalities. I don't know on Elon. Like, look, in the world in which UFOs exist, I would have to think he's got to know some stuff, you know? Like, I don't know if he's playing
Especially
dumb
if these
specifically.
rocket guys like Tim are fucking dedicating their lives to this stuff.
Totally, and they have any overlap. Okay, the interesting thing I thought on Elon is he kind of he walked back a couple of things recently. In the last couple of months, somebody mentioned David Grush to him and said, like, you know, maybe we're hiding all this secret tech. And he said, well, if we are hiding secret tech, I would hope that would, you know, come out. And so that was a change in tune. That wasn't this, like, you know, joke, oh, I'm an alien, or like, I would know, like, it's, you know, we don't have high resolution imagery. Like, he kind of walked that back in that you know, interview question.
Yeah.
And then the second thing he said, I think Tucker asked him about UFOs, and he said, I think it's deep black American programs.
Really?
At that point, you're kind of backing yourself into a corner where it's really interesting. Like, what are you saying, man? Are you saying that we have deep black American programs that look like they're breaking physics? So, like, they break conservation momentum, they fly Mach, you know, 10, and then they stop on a dime.
Yeah.
And then they, you know, make right angle turns.
Yeah.
And then they go from, you know, right above the water to like above 80,000 feet, like David Fravor's saying. And, you know, looks like they're, you know, not using chemical combustion. Because if you are, then you're saying we have physics that's in deep black compartments that, you know, well surpass what we're doing with chemical combustion when it comes to Starlink, where you have these, you know, I don't know, 33, 36 Raptor engines, and it's all just mass ejection. And it's all just, you know, Newton's laws.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of backing yourself into a corner where it's like we either have secret physics, or because you're saying this stuff is real in that interview. You're saying this stuff is real.
Yeah.
Or maybe you could hang on like that we have some, you know, really good like radar spoofing. You know, and like that would be your, you know, or FLIR spoofing or whatever. You'd have, you know, some version of that. Maybe you could do holograms and optical spoofing. I don't know what he would say, but it's weird.
It's such a mind fuck because I think if I can think of anyone who'd be more interested, who should be interested in stuff, I would think of him.
No, I'm with you. It's a strange. It feels like, you know, just like there's like dark matter in physics. It's like, what's the dark matter there? Like we can't detect something going on there, and I don't know what it is.
That's so true, man.
Yeah.
That's so true. I gotta take a leap.
Go take a
Let's
leak.
take a quick break.
Yeah, let's do it.
Right
Yeah,
back.
cool.
All right, we're back from our PP break.
Yes.
Yeah, the Elon stuff is crazy. So I did want to ask you,
Yeah.
how did you find this guy Jake Barber? And I don't even know where to start with this guy. Can you explain how you met him, and then how, like, what happened with him and where he came from, like his story?
Yeah. So he was originally like a red team guy who was he was on the program.
What does that mean?
That means he was like meant to infiltrate like adversary groups,
Okay.
and stuff. And so like he was, you know, basically like security for the program. So he was part of the crash retrieval program. He was pipelined through Air Force Combat Control, which is a special, the Air Force version of Special Forces. He didn't become Air Force Special Forces. At that point, he became kind of sheep dipped, if you know that term, in like intel circles or whatever, like erased. Like he became like, you know, director of operations for a helicopter company, and you know, that was basically his title.
Okay.
But he was working with these, you know, prime contractors. You might be able to guess who they are. He doesn't reveal who they are exactly, but
So he says he was working with these secret aerospace contractors.
Aerospace contractors.
And I would imagine he's talking about companies that are like or similar to Battelle or any of these other ones, like Lockheed or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. You can guess.
He didn't say.
He said if you tried to guess two, you'd probably get them right on your first try.
So I might have got those two right. Who
Maybe. And so he's doing retrieval operations for them, and then on behalf of his employer, he goes to red team Stephen Greer. Stephen Greer was we were just talking about this. He was like the go-to guy for like any whistleblower in the government. Like he was the guy. The Disclosure Project was for the last 20 years.
So he was trying to subvert Stephen Greer's whistleblowers.
Trying to subvert, and in 2023, Stephen Greer held his like disclosure, Congress thing or whatever, and he had done a version of this 2 decades prior in 2001, I think, and it was with a lot of really impressive, amazing whistleblowers, and unfortunately it's kind of couched under the veneer of Stephen Greer, who has certain issues,
Yeah.
personality.
Everybody, every single respectable person in the UFO world, they all detest Stephen Greer.
He can.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
I can imagine why. But
Yeah.
I don't know if there's like any kind of like solid reason why they don't like him.
I don't know the guy personally, and I've been trying to interview him for like a year through various go-betweens, and I've gotten a lot of like weird ego and responses, and I don't know what the deal is.
Yeah.
So for anybody watching,
I'll
like,
put you in touch with him.
oh, thanks, man, appreciate it. That'd be awesome. Yeah.
I'll trade you for Grush.
That's not a fair trade, bro. I need somebody else. That's so funny. So
Like we're trading them these UFO people like Pokemon cards.
yeah, exactly. Gotta write you. It's
Greer's like in the Pokemon. What would he be? Is he like a?
Don't say it.
I don't know. I'm not. I know like there's collectibles. You got to catch them all.
Yeah,
but like,
yeah.
which one would Greer be? Would he be the
you talk-
Charizard or what?
Maybe it might be Charizard. I don't know.
Okay.
What's the big one that would puff out all that stinky gas?
What's the most valuable Pokemon? Charizard, right?
No, it's Mew.
It's Mew.
and
Mewtwo.
Mewtwo. No, Mew is even more valuable than Mewtwo.
Oh.
Mewtwo, and then Mew is like the baby Mewtwo, I think.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
All right.
Yeah, you got to if you're collecting these guys, you got to have Greer on your belt.
Yeah, I know.
Like you explained that to me,
Hook
right?
it up,
He's
hook
one of
it
the
up.
he's one of the most legendary like OG UFO people.
Totally.
Right? You said he was like in the 90s. He was the only guy.
He was like the only guy. But I mean, that's actually an important thing to correct. He was the only very public-facing guy, and that's why he became who he is now. Mm-hmm. But I think he took a lot of his stuff from a guy named William Hamilton, who would write about these deep underground military bases, covert operations, and there was a lot of actually hard-headed research going on at the time, and he kind of shored it up and made it this more public thing. It was interesting. It's an interesting origin story because I don't quite understand how he went from. He was a physician. And
He just says he was an ER doctor.
He was an ER doctor, and then he got super into UFOs.
He said during one of his CE5 things,
Yeah.
there was an Air Force spook or something there and saw the stuff he was doing and told the CIA guy, the head of the CIA, who then wanted to go to dinner with him.
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting. I mean, and again, I believe the Jake Barber account, and like it kind of comports with that, where it involves like trying to call stuff in, which is so.
okay.
At that time, you have this guy Albert Stubblebine,
Yes.
who also has connections with remote viewing at the time, and John Alexander, who's this long time kind of UFO historian, but he also debunks certain things, and he
Also
clearly
very
has
close to
deep government
Bledsoe.
ties, also close with Bledsoe. And inserts himself in like all sorts of interesting cases. Like John Hutchinson was this guy who would claim to like have mind matter effects with like these like metallic instruments around him in California, and John Alexander shows up there. John Alexander is this very interesting figure in UFO world where he just pops in like, at very opportune times.
So Stubblebine Greer claims he offered him $2 billion to participate in the
Legacy
the PSYOP.
UFO I thought it was like come join our UFO program or something. It was okay, interesting.
He explained it to me like it was part of he offered him $2 billion to basically be a part of their building the public narrative or something.
Okay, interesting. Well, that sounds like BS.
Sounds like right.
I mean, I think there's an email showing that maybe, but
Okay.
I don't think the offer was real. I mean, Stubblebine's this weird character. He's Army counter intel, and he's also on record touting all sorts of other bizarre conspiracies. And he's one of these people you just don't know.
Stubblebine is?
Stubblebine is,
Huh.
yeah. And so it's one of these people you just don't know what to make of him. But they do insert themselves in Greer's life, and then Greer becomes the de facto guy where if you're on the inside and you're working at Lockheed or Northrop or you're a CIA contractor or whatever, and you see some shit and you want the public to know, you go to Greer. And so the Disclosure Project archives are to this day probably like among the best UFO databases, treasure troves of pretty interesting contemporary information. And so you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater as much as he's a very interesting, kind of strange character. You
Yeah.
know, there's some ego there.
He's easy to dismiss for sure.
Yeah, and there's definitely some messianic vibe. Like it feels like he's, you know,
Yeah.
so he's the guy who's
Yeah.
bringing the thing. It's like, come on, dude, it's everybody. You know?
Yeah, it is most people. Yeah, and this, you know, it's just like there's also like a thing when somebody has all the answers to everything.
Yep.
You know, there's a weird thing that happens there too.
Yep.
But, what were we talking? Oh, we were talking about Jake Barber. So,
Yep.
so Greer was hosting this thing where he had all these whistleblowers. He was providing an outlet for these whistleblowers to come out. And you were saying that Jake Barber went there to try to
Red team.
Red team meaning what?
Infiltrate Greer and
Trying to like bust one of these guys for blowing the whistle.
bust the whole organization,
The whole
maybe
organization.
infiltrate the organization, and then become, you know, like the guy from Legacy who's feeding info back into Legacy UFO programs from, like, you know, this important kind of vulnerability threat vector or whatever.
Yeah.
And so he's at this Congress or whatever, and, you know, his story is that Michael Herrera, do you know who that is?
Yeah.
He's a Marine who was in the Philippines, and he gets diverted with his unit of, I think, like 8 or 9 people to Indonesia. And Indonesia is a disaster zone. It's due to this earthquake. There's a tsunami warning, and so everybody's evacuating the area. And he and his Marines are apprehended. First, he sees an 8-gon, like an octagon-shaped craft hovering above the treetops that he says is Vanta Black, and it's like he calls it blacker than black, and it's above the treetops. And he starts to close in on that craft with his Marines because they're like, what the hell is going on here? And then they get apprehended by this elite paramilitary unit, which in, like, I think it was 2009, like they had like bioscanners and like all sorts of gear you would never expect. That they were clearly, and they were very well trained, probably tier 1 special forces, and we're kind of running circles around these Marines, saying stuff like, it's easy to get lost in the woods, or it's easy to get lost in the jungle, you know, like, well, you know.
Did these guys say they were part of any specific branch of the military, or did they have any like badging on them?
They
or
had
anything?
it was completely nondescript, but very
Wow.
advanced, according to Herrera. And
So private.
yeah, maybe, yeah. And they were loading these crates onto this flatbed, this truck. It was like a Ford F-250 or something. And he was like, I don't know what the crates were or whatever. And so Barber, he's at this disclosure event where Herrera is giving this account. And Herrera also gets interviewed by Sean Ryan as well. And Barber's like, I could see the authenticity in Herrera, and you know, what am I doing here, sort of thing. And there are other reasons, I guess, Barber felt like he was betrayed by his, you know, contractor in the past. And at that moment, he goes like, fuck this, I'm gonna like red team the red team, or I'm gonna like red team, you know, I'm gonna talk to these guys earnestly.
Yeah.
I'm gonna side up with, you know, the Herreras of the world and try to see if we can get, you know, some of these truths out. And so he talks to Herrera, and he says that the crates actually had people in them in Indonesia, and that these crates were bringing back these psionic assets that are used for the UFO program to attract UFOs. And so it's this crazy story.
Psionic assets meaning like
People.
11 from Stranger Things. They're trying to find girls or young children.
I don't know.
People
I
that
don't.
had superpowers.
I don't know what age. Again, there are stories that like really match Stranger Things as far as the ages of the people being recruited into the programs, and that gets into some weird shit.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what age these people were, because they were in these like metallic containers and they were being evacuated from the area. I mean, even the fact that they're being kept in the metallic containers is weird, right? Like, it's
Greer
like,
also said there was they were trying to get homosexual people.
that's apparently this thing. Apparently, gay men and people who are left-handed.
yeah.
And again, this is something I have no idea if that's
Right.
how true that is, but that's.
I'm just
part of
trying
it.
I'm trying to like think through the logistics of that. You're in an earthquake zone where there was a crazy natural disaster. People are like, I don't know if they speak English, right? Or if the other guys speak Indonesian.
Right.
But like, were they like, raise your hand if you're a homosexual, or like, are you left-handed or right-handed? Like, how are you doing this? Are you just bulk gathering these people and then figuring it out later?
I don't know. And there's another question is like, were they engaging in operations and did they have to evacuate because of the tsunami, or were they
Right.
and this is the way Herrera presented on Sean Ryan, which is more nefarious, honestly, where it's like, are you taking advantage of the fact that there's a disaster zone and people could go missing?
Yeah.
And taking them back with you, which is like weird.
Of course they
Yeah.
would be. Why wouldn't they be?
Well, it's a question of like, were those people already like willfully signed up for the program? They were attracting stuff in the jungle of Indonesia. That's why the black craft was there. I guess the black craft, I think, was human.
yeah.
So I take that back. But like maybe that was part of the operation. But like,
So, yeah,
they were like engaging in field operations there, or were you just the operation itself was to round up these people who were lost?
That's,
And that's
the
this
impression
question.
that I got, was that, I mean, just from watching your podcast, the impression I got was that they saw there was a disaster there and thought this would be an opportunity to
Right.
extract some people
So
we can use.
I want to talk to Herrera, and I want to get to the bottom of it. He says that on the Sean Ryan podcast.
Yeah.
But Barber says on my podcast, or they were engaging in operations and they had to get the hell out of Dodge because this tsunami was coming. So
Barber also seemed very off-put about Sean Ryan and Herrera, saying that they were just going there to exploit the disaster and get those people out. He seemed kind of like,
Right.
He's like, I didn't like that Sean Ryan even used the word human trafficking.
Right.
He was like offended by it almost.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
the kind of ground truth on that, but
So he's saying that that these people are being taken from this place in Indonesia, and my assessment, my guess is that like these people are more in tune to nature. They're not around technology and civilization, so
Jake said that.
he said that on your podcast. Maybe
Yeah.
they have a different diet. They're not eating processed garbage, so that would automatically let them be tapped into this muse or this consciousness or whatever it is.
Well, that's what they say in the U.S. too. Like, you have Dulce, New Mexico, you have Tacoma, Washington, you have Skinwalker Ranch. All of these are ancient Native American lands, and apparently that's where a lot of this kind of weird stuff shows up. Skinwalker Ranch, we know, was professionally, as part of UFO research efforts, investigated
Right.
as part of OSAP from 2007 to 2012. And so I think both like the people are like, it's just like, if you go to like, most indigenous tribes used to talk about people from the stars, you're not going to freak them out. Like they're going to be kind of familiar with those concepts.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, we come down during our ceremonies,
Right.
It's both. I think for the people, it's like they have less of like an allergic reaction because they haven't been indoctrinated with this materialist reductionist
Yes.
Western paradigm where we even need the idea of disclosure. Like for them, it's like second nature or whatever.
Yes, exactly.
And then also the land itself, which then you're getting into like trippier territory as to, is there a residue on the places themselves that where like more kind of strange stuff goes on? Like I would say yes. Like I think a lot of the stuff that goes on at Skinwalker Ranch is genuinely not, we need to explain it via science, but it's
Yeah.
weird. It's definitely weird. Like I don't think that show, The Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch, it might be like, the noise effects probably do it a disservice, and you got that kind of History Channel thing. But like,
yeah, it's produced.
it's produced. But like, I don't think they're lying about a lot of that stuff. And if you just investigate the, first principles, like what's happening there, it's pretty weird. It's pretty weird.
It is.
So
The cattle mutilation thing, though, that they talk about on Mirage Men
yeah.
is fascinating.
Yeah. What's your take there?
Oh, I mean, it just seems like a perfect distraction or just a psyop, right? I mean, but it was all, it seemed like an unintended psyop that worked perfect for them, right? Because I guess there was some sort of, they were trying to prospect for oil, I think it was. There was a company that was trying to find oil by detonating an underground nuclear bomb. And they were trying to test the local agriculture and wildlife to see how far the contamination went in the soil.
Yep.
So they were trying to find, like, they were extracting the glands of these cows to see if they had been affected by this radiation or whatever, see if there was contamination. And that happened to be the same place that they were flying this crazy exotic stuff.
Yeah.
And so the people were like, "Oh my God, we're seeing UFOs, and these cows are looking like this.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it must
yeah,
be,
yeah.
it must be them doing this." So it's
Right.
like, now, okay, that's the perfect place to keep doing these test flights.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
But that was super interesting to learn about that and to see how, like, just like two operations collide and end up being the perfect fucking mind fuck for the public to like
100%.
make sure people don't know what's going on.
100%. No, and that movie's super important to realize how sophisticated a lot of the psyops can be. And this, like, you can, write scripts in back rooms and like make everything kind of weave together and fit. But like the A could, be a data point, B could be a data point. They could look completely uncorrelated, but like you're the source of both or whatever, and like that's definitely a thing you have to look out for in this world for sure.
So going back to Barber, he was saying that there was a secret place where they were trying to use these people that they captured and give them drugs and get them to summon these UFOs.
Yeah, stress inoculation and dissociation. And
I forgot about that.
It's like weird, And I think people who've had trauma in their past, I guess, are predisposed. I mean, all of this seems a little
Greer was
crazy.
saying it was dopaminergic drugs that they were giving him.
Yeah, that might make sense. Yeah. I mean, again, this is not based on firsthand knowledge, so I don't know.
This
is all like super speculative.
Yeah.
But I also so I'm in the camp where I believe the summoning stuff is very real and very dangerous. And I feel pretty I think Jake Barber's story is like pretty beyond reproach actually on the like surface level details of it. And then
what do you mean by that? What do you mean beyond reproach? Like you think it's super legit?
I think it's super legit. Yeah, I do. Where I get worried about what might be an after effect is this idea of like summoning things into your purview. I think that stuff's really real, and I think it's dangerous. I don't think it's for the, I think you have to have very pure intentions, and I think if you show up in certain places and you try to do these things, I think it could end very badly for people. And I think it's the reason you have all this stuff at Skinwalker Ranch where like often it's guys with big egos or whatever. It's like they have this story of this like Hell's Angels chieftain who like goes there and he's like put into a catatonic state like on the mesa or whatever, and then he has to go he's in the hospital for 3 weeks after that. And so I think it's kind of dangerous to do some of this stuff if you're not doing it safely and honestly with it just pure intentions.
What's the danger?
Have you've had Dana Pasulka on, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so like you remember the story with St. Francis of Assisi?
No.
So he's this he's actually kind of grows up like kind of this popular guy, and he's kind of life of the party kind of guy, and then he becomes a brother, and I think he's in a monastery, and he starts to become more religious, and he's on Mount Laverne, and he's hiking with his confidant brother Leo, who records all the stuff that happens to him, and he basically has an encounter with an angel, and the angel burns him. And basically,
oh, I remember this now.
It gives him, what he calls this. He says it's like a vision of Christ. But if you actually go back to the original translation, which Pasulka did, it's a flaming torch. And
what language was it? Do you remember?
It must
Hebrew
have
or
been
Greek?
No, it must have been Latin.
Oh, Latin.
Yeah, I think so. Medieval Italy.
Yeah, probably Latin. Okay. So St. Francis of Assisi was when? Like in medieval times?
13th century, I think.
13th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So like the subplot of the whole thing with St. Francis of Assisi is like he has basically electromagnetic radiation damage, and he calls it the stigmata, and he says it's a vision of Christ, but like it's probably what you would say is just electromagnetic radiation now, and he dies from this stuff. And if you look at the files given to Gary Nolan on people who've had paranormal basically encounters with UFOs and with alien beings, it's often electromagnetic damage and ultraviolet burns, and I think some of these truths have been disseminated through fiction. If you watch Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the guy has a sunburn after he sees a UFO, and I think Steven Spielberg definitely has some spooky sources, and he has across the years. And so I think calling these things into I think there are two things that attract this stuff: nuclear and certain states of consciousness. And the latter is going to give a lot of people an allergic reaction if you're coming from kind of like a more Western materialist reductionist academia. That's where you're coming from. But I do believe that's part of it. And calling these things into your purview can be very dangerous, a la all the files that Nolan looked at, and a la what happened to, St. Francis of Assisi. And I think, as with all of this stuff, there's a left-hand path and there's a right way to do it. And the left-hand path is basically occult stuff. It's like trying to summon stuff, and you're gonna get burned. It's a typical, every myth, whether it's Lord of the Rings, Faust, Prometheus, it always ends badly. We've seen this movie before. If you want the secret knowledge and you don't have the right, pure intention in your heart, you're just gonna get burned. Because what you see will be an excavation of what's inside of you. I mean that.
So you're saying that, first of all, when it comes to Gary Nolan, he was looking at people who, these people that he studied, people that got injured and or died.
Yep.
Right, after having radiation poisoning or something like this from these things. Those people, how were they getting in contact with these things? Were they summoning them?
So that's a total black box. I don't know. I have no idea. But I just think coming into contact with them, it's like, the legend, I'm not saying the Ark of the Covenant is real, but this is a good analogy. It's like, the holiest of holies, if you don't go in with a pure heart, it's going to be bad for you. I think if you're dealing with this other world, it's going to, kind of see you from the inside and out. And it's going to be very bad for you if you. It's a classic myth, and I think it's not just myth. I think it's very real. I think we live inside of a cave, basically, and that cave is our kind of perceptive epistemology. And if you want to see something that's outside of the cave, you can ask for it, and it can come, and you're going to get, hit like a load of bricks if you ask with the wrong intention.
What you're describing sounds a lot like a psychedelic trip.
It's very similar, because if you go into a psychedelic trip and you have a lot of ego going in, you're gonna get smashed. Yeah. It's gonna excavate, but it's not necessarily bad for you. It'll excavate what's inside of you often, but it needs to be done in a way that like you can handle. And honestly, I don't believe in that's why I don't believe in I believe in veterans who are on their last legs who need to take Ibogaine or of course, or mushrooms or whatever. Yeah. But this let's just willy-nilly do this recreationally. I don't think that's going to be good at all. The veil
it's definitely not for everybody.
It's not. We have the veil for a reason. You don't want to unveil everything all at once. Right. And so I do believe that we have a very limited scope. We only see between 400 and 700 nanometers on the electromagnetic wave spectrum. Our decibel range that we hear is limited. The idea that there's nothing outside of what we see is ridiculous. And then you have people like Donald Hoffman, cognitive psychologist, showing that what we see are basically icons of reality. They're categorizations of reality. You're not seeing electromagnetic wavelengths. You're not seeing the waves themselves. You are seeing this table, right? Because you need to instantly categorize things. Yes. So the idea that we are seeing ground reality is crazy. And then the idea that physics is the end of history is also crazy. Our consciousness definitely plays a part in what we're seeing. You say you experience synchronicities all the time. Yeah. You're basically admitting that your personal epistemology is out of step with the Western materialist dogma. You're admitting that and saying that. Mm-hmm. And maybe you're saying, I don't know, it could be the pattern matching of my mind or whatever. But if you get down to it with most people, they're yeah, a bunch of shit happened to me that's beyond chance and probability, and there's probably something with your consciousness that affects the material world or whatever. So I think it's not beyond the pale to say if you want to experience something paranormal, you probably will if you do certain things, and doing that in a reckless way is very bad. And doing that, honestly, it's the whole issue, I think, with the UFO thing. The whole context of this conversation is around weaponization of this stuff. Yeah. And in certain cases, I always my rallying cry is it's actually bad for national security, because I want the powers that be to let more out. So that's I'll say that, right? It's bad for national security if the left hand isn't talking to the right hand, and Russia and China have their own UFO programs and they're beating us. But my motivation is not weaponizing these things. I kind of want to poke the bear a little, so they let more out. Yeah. Because they are holding on to a lot of stuff. But the fact that this whole conversation is couched in how can we build weapons out of this metamaterial that is manna from heaven is so perverse and fucked.
Yes.
And so like my whole goal, like to the extent that I ever do anything in a capitalist context with the UFOs stuff, it's I want civil side infrastructure updates in our cities to make our lives better, and I want more meaning in the world, in people's individual lives. And if I can do that and have top cover from national security people who are like, yeah, if you find something dual use, we'll take it to the back room and work on it. Fine. I'm cool with protecting the free world and making sure we're ahead of China and Russia.
Yeah.
But the whole idea that like people's impetus into this topic, like that the fact that they're into it is to just like, let's weaponize this like immediately is so fucked. Like you don't know what you're dealing with. It probably is angels and demons.
That's the whole reason that we have everything that we have is, the most absurd and mind-blowing science and technology that we have was literally created in the context of war. Like
That's
John
right.
von Neumann, like you were saying, the brain power of that motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like was literally used and monopolized for war. Like
Yeah.
I think it was him. I think he was the one that calculated the exact elevation that the Fat Man Little Boy nukes needed to be to cause the most civilian casualties. Like he estimated the exact elevation they needed to detonate those at to
Jesus.
kill the most people. It's death.
It's death. Yeah. It's so, yeah, I didn't even know that's crazy.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, in Annie Jacobson's Pentagon Brain book, all about the history of DARPA. Fuck, wow, dude, one of the most insane books.
Yeah, that's an amazing book. That's
one of my favorite books. Of all time.
She's amazing. What an epic chronicler of just
love her, man.
Yeah.
And her voice, God.
She's a great voice. She's like
She
the
has
best podcast
She
voice.
has the best
ever.
voice. The best voice.
She
It's
does.
just so seductive.
So funny. Yeah, she's awesome.
But yeah, no, I don't know how. I don't like going to what you're saying. I don't know
Yeah.
how you break out of that, right? Like, how do you break out of that? Like, that's the way the world works.
Yeah.
right? That's the way the world works. The main motivation for technological innovation is for superpowers to maintain their power and to gain more power.
Well, I mean, again, this requires a predisposition to some pretty trippy kind of ontological worldviews, but like I think the veil is dropped. I think like we're seeing more of this stuff now, and it might be because we're not being super responsible with our world. We live in this multipolar nuclear world, and you're right, to the extent we have access to, anything off the books and, of celestial origin or whatever, we're weaponizing it immediately. And, things are just not good on a global scale right now.
No.
So I think what we might be seeing is kind of intervention a la the three body problem or UFOs and nukes with Robert Hastings, where if you talk to any of these guys, any of the ICBM security personnel, any of these people who, firsthand witnesses, their first instinct is always they're trying to tell us to like stop our way, to hang back and like not destroy ourselves. So, and then you can get into the Mike Masters things where it's like, is it some future version of humanity that is coming back in time, trying to sustain the existence of the human timeline because like we're going to blow ourselves up.
Yeah.
And who would care more than the future version of ourselves?
Exactly.
It's like in Back to the Future where it's like, Marty goes back in time because he wants his parents, to be together.
Yep.
Or whatever.
Yep. And what Mike says about the pedomorphism thing that happens, how our ancestors, that when the adults look more like the children of our descendants, is crazy. And that's like all the depictions of the aliens look like children.
Yeah, that's right.
So
yeah.
in 500,000 years, fully grown adults are going to look more like the toddlers of today.
If you were to ask any conventional biologist, like somebody who doesn't believe in aliens, what will humanity look like in a few thousand years? You'd say, okay, humans are getting domesticated, so we're losing the melanin in our skin, so it's getting kind of more pale. Our brains are becoming selected for because of more white-collar work, so cranial size gets much bigger. Nose and ears, they don't matter so much because, we're not hunter-gathering.
Right.
There is paedomorphosis, there's neoteny. We retain the larval features of young people in our, basically like your kids are going to look like what your ancestors look like in the future.
Right.
And we're becoming domesticated. A dog is to a wolf what we will look like, in the future is to us.
Right.
And so I think, and then if you look at like all the databases around UFO abductions, over 50% in almost all cases are hominid creatures.
Yep.
So and then you think the likelihood of evolutionary convergence on Zeta Reticuli, Proxima
Right.
Centauri, of on them looking like hominid beings.
What are the chances their
So low.
atmosphere, their gravity, their solar system, everything, like were they water worlds? I know most of the Goldilocks planets that we've discovered have been water worlds, if I'm not mistaken. So like if they evolved in a world that was mostly water,
Yeah, it wouldn't look anything like us.
are they going to have a brain that sits directly on top of the head?
No, you have 8 million species on Earth, and you have like 20 upright hominid, you know,
Exactly.
and then you have like one like
that
us
figured out the
or whatever.
technology.
And
Right,
then, so you're
right.
saying like a gray looks exactly like
Yeah.
us? It doesn't make any sense.
That blew my mind the most out of that book, is how rare we are
Yes.
as a species, Homo sapiens, on planet Earth, which is a planet that's teeming with fucking life.
Yes.
And how few planets that we've discovered that are habitable of life, and like how much, like he was basically saying, it's like we are 0.0001% of the species on this Earth. So if you extrapolate that out into the universe and how many planets are able to inhabit life, what's the chance they're gonna look like us, like that accurate?
Yeah. Yeah.
It seems almost like impossible.
Yeah, no, it's exactly. It's the likelihood. And if you're seeing a thing in your neighborhood, it's more likely to be related. Think about like North Sentinel Island is off the coast of India,
Yeah.
and they never get visited, occasionally by missionaries, and they'll kill the missionaries.
Right.
And they probably think when people visit them, like, you know, you're just some white dude and you like show up there, they'd be like, you're an alien. Because they don't know the rest of the world exists. But if you
Right.
see a thing in your neighborhood and it looks like you, it's probably an extension of you. It's probably
Yeah.
related to you. That's
Right.
just kind of Occam's razor.
Yeah.
So, and then we have 20 billion, you know, Earth-like planets in the, you know, Milky Way galaxy. So people love to say that. But then you have over a trillion non-Earth-like planets. So again, the likelihood that you are seeing a thing in your neighborhood that looks like you, doesn't only look like you, looks like what you probably are going to look like in a certain amount of time from a conventional evolutionary biology perspective.
Yeah.
I love the Mike Masters thesis as a result of that. Where I think Mike, where I would disagree with him, or where I think he might fall slightly short, and he would probably admit this because he's done amazing foundational work, is like, I don't know if it's us from the future. I think we might be stuck in a time-bound reality where we're subject to Zeno's arrow of time, where we are kind of indelibly, permanently moving forward in Zeno's arrow of time, and they have some ability to do trans-temporal stuff where they can time travel. And so you get into all these weird questions of like, if time travel is possible at any point in the future, which he's saying it is, right, with his book, because they're saying they're coming back in time.
They wouldn't be able to go back past when that time machine was created. Is that right?
That's right. Then it's always been inherently available. If time travel is available at any point in the future, it's always been available inherently.
Right. So
then
that
you're
means time travel would have had to been figured out somewhere else in the universe.
Yes, that's right. And so then you get into these questions of like, you have the angels and demons ontology, and you have the human future time travel to ontology. I think a really valid, you know, use of like a think tank would be like, how do those two things comport? Are these ascended humans that have trans-temporal capabilities, time travel capabilities, that are like the next step on the evolutionary chain? But like saying future is kind of a misnomer, because in their paradigm, time doesn't even exist the way it exists in ours.
Right.
So I don't know. You get into all sorts of like crazy rabbit holes. But what I love about that book is it's very scientific. It goes through cases, and it goes through data to the extent we have data. Unfortunately, the data is kind of scant, but it goes through the data, and it just makes a very compelling ground-up argument for why time travel is involved and why they're related to humans and not just, you know,
The
little
time
green men.
dilation paradox thing is really interesting too. Like how he said, I love the part where he's talking about like if we sent some interstellar crew out into the universe to find another planet or whatever, he's like 20 years of their rocket time would be like 100,000 years of our time here on Earth.
Totally.
So by like 20 years into their trip, we would have figured out technology on Earth to be able to blow past them. And like he's like 20 years into their trip, we're gonna have people from Earth passing them, and they just left that morning with a belly full of breakfast, and they're like, "What the fuck? We wasted our entire lives on this." Like, that's an interesting paradox too.
Oh, it's a fascinating one. And you have the whole Planet of the Apes thing. Yeah, it's like time itself is very weird. In general relativity, you have time dilation, which we just described, the twin paradox, all that stuff. And then in quantum stuff, I don't think we quite understand time. We take it as like this formal axiom in Schrodinger's equation, but it's actually kind of really weird. And like time and gravity are coupled in general relativity. The closer you get to a gravitational source, time
Yes.
slows. And in quantum stuff, we can't figure out gravity. That's this big field of quantum gravity, which has turned into string theory, which was like, we've never been able to solve for gravity. We've
Yeah.
never been able to, fully, figure
I
that
love
out.
that documentary you did too with Eric Weinstein and
Hal
Hal
Puthoff.
Puthoff. Yeah,
That
yeah.
was fun, man.
Like string theory is some limited hangout or something.
That's-
to basically distract everybody.
Yeah, Eric makes that proposition. He goes, I don't know. He goes, if you were trying to limit the physics, string theory would be a pretty good way to do it.
Yeah.
Which gets beyond me. Okay, so like, is string theory this like padded walls 2D version of the real physics that they have in the back room? And it's just this like initiation recruitment thing, but it's like less dangerous. I don't know if you can do that deliberately. That seems like maybe like beyond human coordination abilities. That it gets beyond my physics knowledge, and Eric might be able to speak to that more in a more sophisticated way as to like why that might even be possible. But yeah,
Crazy
it's
thing that
interesting.
he said that really resonated with me in that video was he was like, look at the Civil War in 1860. And less than a human lifetime later, we figured out the fucking atom bomb.
Yeah,
How to
yeah.
drop an atom bomb out of a plane in less than 100 years.
Less than 100 years. Less than 100 years. I mean,
So like just the understanding of physics, how that changes our world and our technology and our civilization.
we were using muskets in dude.
We went from muskets to nukes.
To nukes. And if you take the three body problem seriously, where you have the Fermi paradox, where it's like,
Can you
well,
explain the three body problem for people who might
yeah,
not
it's like
comprehend
these trisolarian aliens that like we've been in contact with. It takes place actually originally in the Cultural Revolution in China, and you have all these like scientists getting kind of like stamped out or whatever, and then you have modern scientists that are making contact with aliens, and often it's in these extremely advanced science projects like particle accelerators at places like CERN, and they're getting all sorts of like interesting comms from the aliens. And the trisolarian aliens are like in touch with the government, and they're like, you cannot tell the populace that we are in touch with you because it's going to like kind of, it's going to tip off mass hysteria. So we have to like slowly infiltrate ourselves, which is, by the way, very similar to Arthur C. Clarke's amazing book, Childhood's End. And I think this idea that like an alien civilization is slowly incepting itself is very popular, and actually probably a good answer to the, Fermi paradox. If you were incredibly sophisticated, you wouldn't show up as this foreign invader hominid. You would just incept yourself. You'd create hybrids. You'd do genetic experiments. You'd do all sorts of stuff. So what were we just talking about? Why did I bring up the three body problem? You remember?
I forgot.
Oh,
we're talking about muskets to nukes.
Yeah, to nukes. So, like, if you take the three body problem, like in the three body problem, there's this dark forest analogy. And it's like the universe could be teeming with life, and it could be adaptive from the perspective of an alien race to not show themselves to you because they're worried that you're going to kill them or like going to harm them. And why would they care until you start creating nukes or like certain things that like maybe you reach a certain level of consciousness, maybe you create a nuke, maybe it's high energy physics, and maybe it's certain people reaching certain levels of consciousness. And then all of a sudden they make themselves known, where it's like you are living in this time-bound simulation, and you're poking at the edges of the simulation. You can do it with consciousness, you can do it with high energy physics, and here we are, like trying to guard the simulation, and like make sure you're not going to like mess anything up in a big way. And so I think that's actually a very good answer to the Fermi paradox. It's like, why don't they show themselves? Well, it's actually like probably evolutionarily adaptive for them to not show themselves. It like makes more sense that they wouldn't in many ways.
Yes. Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. So you think, what are your thoughts on the whole string theory thing? Do you think that it's like, I know Eric's like gone off the rails with it. He says Michio Kaku's out of control.
Yeah.
And he's talked to Michio Kaku.
Yeah. I'm on Eric's side. Like, I think clearly it doesn't work, and like it doesn't take Eric or any physicist, like you or me, can say it doesn't work. It like, name me like a piece of technology that's come from string theory.
Right.
Can't name anything, unfortunately. Name me something that's come from quantum field theory, like semiconductors, like a third of our economy, quantum field theory. So,
Wow.
yeah. So it's like one thing is like this, you're lost in, like science is the map and not the territory, in my belief. So
Yes.
like my metaphysical worldview is more like Plato. Like it's like there's something beyond us that's true. It exists in the world of like forms and ideas. But like when it comes to science, I'm more kind of Aristotelian in that what is useful is true. And the quantum stuff is eminently useful. If you want the most accurate sensor, it's a quantum sensor. If you want the best computer, eventually it'll be a quantum computer. Quantum stuff just seems to work incredibly well, especially at like lower scales, subatomic scales. And it's really useful from an engineering standpoint. And string theory is just basically trying to force fit what describes our kind of cosmological worldviews of general relativity and quantum field theory, force fit them with math. And so you have a map here the map is not the territory. So you have stuff that you can do cool things with quantum field theory. You have some stuff you can do cool things with general relativity. Neither are descriptors of the underlying reality. So the maps are going to be a little jagged and off. String theory is like you have these jagged off maps that aren't perfect and you are forcing them together with math. Like it doesn't take a genius like you or I could look at that and be like, that's the wrong approach.
Yeah.
It's just the wrong approach. So that's the way I look at it from like a more high level perspective. As to like, whether it's some limited hangout, there are all these really interesting things I've uncovered with so the people that funded quantum gravity were, it was like initially kind of established at this Chapel Hill conference at University of North Carolina in 1957.
57, yeah.
And it was this guy, Agnew Bonson, and he was obsessed with gravity. And
wasn't there also a guy named DeWitt and then
Bryce DeWitt.
Bryce DeWitt.
Yeah, Institute of Field Physics was Bonson's outfit, and Bryce DeWitt was his chief theoretical physicist. And he's basically convening the top physicists in the world at the time. I don't think anybody would argue with this. Like John Wheeler, Peter Bergman, Freeman Dyson, like these legends. And they're all trying to figure out why gravity breaks down, at subatomic scale. So like why gravity doesn't work with quantum stuff. And that establishes the field of quantum gravity, from which you could say string theory is like a later offshoot, right? This is the crazy part. Bonson in the back room is funding Townsend Brown. And in my opinion, I've uncovered all sorts of stuff as to why Townsend Brown experimentally is figuring out real physics and is using these capacitors and with high voltage experimentation in a way that ostensibly seems to create some sort of connection between electromagnetism and gravity, which again, if you were to talk to any conventional physicist, they'd be like, if you can experimentally do that, that is crazy. Leads to all sorts of amazing possibilities, propulsion, comms, whatever. And so I think Bonson was like funding some like, back of the house research with this guy Townsend Brown, who was, according to a couple of books, this guy Paul Laviolette, he was maybe even at the Chapel Hill conference. And the thing about Brown is he was never an amazing theoretician. He was more of an experimentalist. He was more of a Tesla type. And he actually wasn't like traditionally super credentialed, but he had theories around what he was doing. And I think he was kind of breaking physics, and there are all these kind of credible witnesses who saw what he was doing and were freaked out. Edward Teller was one of those witnesses who freaked out. Curtis LeMay witnessed his experiments. And so, I think he was doing some really interesting off the book stuff. And then meanwhile, academic physics is being sent into a cul-de-sac, being sent into a dead end. Is that incidental and emergent? I don't know. I don't know how conspiratorial to be about that, but it's fascinating.
Yeah. Jeremy Riss was explaining to me, alien scientist.
Yeah, he's awesome.
He does great work on he's like a fucking historian on this anti-gravity history.
He really is.
And all this stuff. It's great. The amount of knowledge he has is unimaginable.
Oh yeah.
But like, I think he was explaining to me that DeWitt and Witten were both working on this stuff previous to that North Carolina summit event or whatever.
Yeah. So okay, and then here's the interesting string theory connection. Lewis Witten was the representative of that conference from RIAS, which is Martin Corporation's anti-gravity research group. And so Martin Corporation is pre-Lockheed merger. So it's like the original Lockheed Martin has like an anti-gravity research group. Lewis Witten is researching gravity, and he even says this. There's a video online where he goes, I was meant to research gravity, and Wright Field told me to research gravity. The whole conference is sponsored by Wright Airfield.
That's crazy.
Which is the epicenter of all UFO lore. Bryce DeWitt almost worked at RIAS as well, and then he ended up at the Institute of Field Physics. There are all these interesting aerospace connections. There was so much, it was so bound up in aerospace that John Wheeler would complain at like how like tied to aerospace and anti-gravity. He kept being like, all this talk of anti-gravity, it's just too much. Like, we have to figure this out in like a serious academic way.
Yeah.
But that just shows you the prevailing ethos of, the place itself. And so it's really fascinating. Wright Field had its own, this guy named Josh Goldberg, who is a PhD from Syracuse, and they were systematically studying anti-gravity. Anti-gravity in the 50s was, Lewis Whitten even says this, in the wind, meaning it was everywhere. But it also, the other meaning of in the wind is it's a spy term that could mean in the dark. And so it's really interesting. Like, that, there could be some double meaning there. So the tie between quantum gravity and string theory is Lewis Whitten's son is a guy named Ed Witten.
Yeah.
Ed Witten is the #1 string theorist, in the world, bar none. And
this is the guy that Eric was talking about on the Joe Rogan podcast, saying this guy is like untouchable. He's like, I'm so scared.
Michael
of him.
Jordan. Yeah, exactly.
I'm so intimidated by this guy's intelligence.
Yeah, exactly. Like alien level.
Yeah,
Exactly. So that's Ed Witten. So that's the son of the guy studying anti-gravity with Martin Corporation and establishing quantum gravity, which is this cul-de-sac. So like, your son is like the king of the cul-de-sac. And like, maybe there's some interesting updates going on in the back of the house with guys like Townsend Brown, who also has a work history at Martin Corporation.
Right.
He joined Martin Corporation in 1943 or 2 or 3, right when Skunkworks starts, the same year Skunkworks starts. So there's some interesting, weird connections there. A lot of smoke. I don't have fire.
So this Lewis Whitten fella, has anyone talked to him? Have you ever talked to him? Has Eric ever talked to him?
He is, I think, 99 years old or something.
God.
He's super old. And I have a friend who has corresponded over email with him. And as soon as he said, hey, I want to get into the anti-gravity stuff, the line went dark. And he stopped responding to emails. I make of it that we've made updates in the world of gravity that are off the books and not. And you don't even need me to say this. Like the National Science Foundation's now coming out with these podcasts talking about extended electrodynamics and literally scientific frameworks that if I were to say this a year ago to you, you'd be like, that's quacky, that doesn't make any sense. And like, this was relegated to like 0 point energy conferences in the Southwest, like some crystal healer would tell you about extended electrodynamics, and you'd be like, okay, yeah, go ahead. But it's being vindicated as real. And electrogravitics being vindicated. A lot of people who are high up have kind of like, hey, you're kind of onto things with this stuff. And I just interviewed Carl Nell, who's the Army representative for the UAP task force, worked alongside Grush, extremely smart, was the deputy CTO of Northrop Grumman. Part of what the argument I made in my Townsend Brown documentary is that some of this gravity, interesting gravity stuff made it into the B-2 stealth bomber. Some of Brown's work.
This is like the ion wind stuff, like the...
Yes.
Somehow, because it looks like the stealth bombers, they look like they defy gravity because they don't look built like they're unless they have some super powerful jet engines. Which they do, but
most legendary airspace journalist in the UK was a guy named Bill Gunston, and he's writing a survey level overview of all aero engine technology since World War II. And he gets to the B-2 stealth bomber, and he says, I do not wish to reside in the Tower of London, so I will refrain from talking about clever wings with leading edges charged to millions of volts positive with trailing edges charged to millions of volts negative. He's talking about the B-2 stealth bomber. And aerospace or Aviation Week, Bill Scott, another amazing aviation journalist, he says, when the B-2 gets revealed, early 90s, he's like, the B-2 surfs its own wave and he uses a Byfield-Brown effect. Some people even think B-2 stands for Byfield-Brown.
Wow.
And so the majority owner of Northrop, where the B-2 came from, Northrop Grumman.
Yeah.
So this is pre-merger with Grumman. The majority owner, or the majority investor rather, is a guy named Floyd Odlum. He's a lawyer, he's a financier for aerospace. He's funding Brown's research in Santa Monica.
Right.
And the research fails, quote unquote, in 67. Then in 68, 3 months later, because the end of 67, early 68, they publish a paper, Northrop, saying we are looking into electroaerodynamics. And it's this paper that was archived in the American Institute of Astronautics and Aeronautics, or Aeronautics and Astronautics. And that paper just goes missing. And so they retract that paper and say, oh, there's nothing to see here, or whatever. And then a couple of decades later, the B-2 stealth bomber gets revealed. So it's like, you tell me. Like, I think there's a there.
Fucking A, dude. So basically in the 50s, before that conference in North Carolina, like the idea is that, or what Eric was speculating is a possibility that this stuff just went dark and got captured by these aerospace companies, and like they came up with a plan to basically like deceive the public, send the public down the string theory rabbit hole, and take all this stuff that DeWitt and Witten and Brown were doing and make this part of this secret black project stuff.
I think it's hard to say whether we just had updates in topological physics and experimental physics, and we figured out some anomalies and like locally useful frameworks where it's like, we know how this works in the context of a single, of this stealth aircraft, but like how generalizable that gets, like how much you can do with that, I don't know. It's a total black box to me. And I don't know how coordinated the sequestering of that. There's a ton of smoke. There's not a lot of fire. It's just hard to say. And then you can either say it was like sequestered by, just humans, where it's like you need top side science, you need black side science or whatever, which we definitely have. I mean, that's ridiculous to say we don't. Even like, Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz, I think, were at the White House, and like some National Security Council person was like, yeah, we're going to like regulate AI just like we regulated physics in the past. And they're like, physics? You're talking about physics? So like, this has definitely been done. The idea that it hasn't been done is absurd.
Yeah.
And so is that coordinated on a human level? Do you believe the three body problem stuff where the aliens are controlling the way science emerges to begin with?
Right.
And like, are they like playing deceptive tricks on our top scientists and then like inspiring other scientists? Like, I don't know, you get into these like crazy questions. And I don't know how it went down. Have we made updates in science in the black? Yeah. Like you watch my Townsend Brown documentary, I think it's hard to come out of it being like, this stuff is fake. Like if you actually like ingest the details, it's like pretty,
absolutely.
Like, and even me, I have to think probabilistically, but I'm like 80%. I don't know.
Yeah. And then, so go back to Jake Barber. So going back to this Jake Barber thing where they're getting these psionic assets from other countries and getting them and putting them in this program using drugs and using protocols to get them to sort of summon these things. He's saying that they're using these people to summon these crafts. Did he say he had any idea where they were coming from?
No, that was... the Jake interview was simultaneously felt historic and epic, and he was so articulate and like such a good, purveyor
such an
of
intelligent
like
dude.
So intelligent,
Similar
clearly.
to Grush.
Yeah, totally. And then where it was incredibly frustrating, even in a way that like Grush is like can get into the theory and speculation, and is like a good fact finder. And it felt like with Jake, he really wanted to like keep to like the core details of like what he experienced, and it was a little frustrating for me because I think I'm strongest on the theory stuff, and like that's why I always want to get into that shit. And like I understand his position to like not want to totally go off the rails and speculate into crazy stuff.
And then there was some sort of tough book hard drive that was held underwater in a glacier lake.
Yep.
On top of a mountain.
Yep. And then and he had to like retrieve that, and then they were trying to like sever the hidden like they were trying to like basically get rid of him, and like because when you're like sheep dipped like that, and you're like director of operations for a helicopter company, there's so much plausible deniability. Your employer can just be like, that dude, what do you tell that guy's crazy? Like people in the public are now saying Jake's crazy or whatever, even if that would, all these guys with DD-214s and like clear history are like coming to back him up, and I think he's totally legit. But like,
who's backing him up?
This guy Don Paul Bales. This other guys that Ross Coulthart has interviewed. So he's one. Fred Baker is another. John Blitch, I think, knows him less well. Doesn't have like a as much of a history with him, but he's a DARPA guy who's come out, and he vetted him, I think, on behalf of Grush and some other people to see if he was the real deal. And like he was like, yeah, this guy's story totally comports with like that world that I've come to know and research a little bit. So
it just seems so crazy to me that they're like, we on Earth, with our motives, our military motives and our financial motives, are able to do something as crazy as summon something from another fucking dimension and crash it.
Yep.
So we can study it.
It feels crazy to me too. The question that begets, which I think is really important that we should all question is like, you hear that we only have, I don't know, 10 to 15 UFOs in our possession. They're in specific hangars or whatever. Or maybe you get one, some people say 1 to 2 crashes a year. So that would be, since Roswell, maybe since a little before that, say 120 or whatever. But if you can like summon these things on command, then you'd expect us to have 1,000 plus.
Right.
If you have 1,000 plus, you're going to get leakage.
Yes.
Right. So like it can't be this like you put a coin in the slot machine that the drink comes out sort of vibe. Like it can't just be this like extremely repeatable, predictable thing.
Right.
It has to be more hard to successfully do than that. And so yeah, there are all these questions that the interview begets that I think people should ask because I don't know the answer to them.
Yeah. And they're like, why isn't he or people he knows or even Greer's people being put in front of Congress and testifying all their stuff? Like,
yeah.
Why are they?
And Jake has said I would 100% testify before Congress. And so that show of confidence I think is important, to which look, my guess is Congress has been lied to before. I've been in like rooms with Congress and I'm like, God, these guys are they're not smart. But like, But I think just the fact that he's willing to do that, I think, and go under oath, under threat of perjury, I think is a good display.
Yeah.
So again, I think that the details are, everybody has to think probabilistically, but I think they're pretty solid. And then it's like, there are so many other questions it begets where it's like, what?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, like what you were saying about like being afraid to interact with this or try to summon it or try to somehow like do one of these CE5 things that Greer talks about, and one of the things that I think I talked about with Greer was this hitchhiker effect that happens where like not only can people get damaged or hurt or killed by the radiation or whatever it is that these things have, but like there's some sort of portal that's permanently opened with you if you're able to interact with this stuff or even see it, to where now like you have unlimited access to all this crazy paranormal stuff.
Yeah.
Like some of the stuff that you see at Skinwalker.
That's extremely common. Like everybody's, all the Skinwalker is a great example. And in those cases, I think it was very negative because, again, I think if you're trying to like weaponize this stuff, it explains, these kind of hauntings where these, aerospace practitioners come home and their kids and their family get haunted by this stuff. It is like they have like residue. Lou Elizondo always calls it a sticky portfolio, and I think he calls it that for a very specific reason, which is like stuff gloms onto you.
Yeah.
And like what it's like you stare at the abyss long enough, the abyss stares back, and I think that's just a truism, especially in this topic.
And then what do you make of all like the infighting of all these people? Like Elizondo versus Greer versus like you have Elizondo calling Greer a terrorist, I think.
Right.
And like, and simultaneously these guys are all writing books, going on all these podcasts. Sure. It's just like, what?
It's weird. And at times I see, all the infighting and I'm like, I'm like tired. Like I just want like more of like a normal life. And like, why am I like covering this stuff? Like, it's just so ridiculous.
It's so easy to get fatigued by it.
It is. I think like the meta psyop would be like, you get distracted by this internal drama or whatever. And like a rule that I really try to adhere to is I don't go after anybody ad hominem. There's like a map that I have of UFOs, and like I should say this for the sake of your audience and my audience. There are people I've interviewed that I suspect have ulterior motives. I don't call out those ulterior motives because I'm in enough danger seeking truth, and I don't want to I don't want people like specifically coming after me because I'm like fucking with them.
Right.
Not only that, but there are people with ulterior motives where, like we said earlier, there are elements of truth to what they say, and like a lot of what people can tell the truth in limited ways and have ulterior motives. That's what people don't understand. So you can sift out valuable stuff. So I think the best way is just be open, friendly, cool with everybody. I'm cool with the two guys you just mentioned. I guess Greer I haven't met yet, but like I would be cool with him. I just try to have like an open, honest, fun conversation, and then glean out what I think is true, and honestly ask rhetorical, if there's any untruths, you ask rhetorical questions that like show on the face of it that like there's something kind of going on here, but like you don't have to call it out directly because it's just you're just gonna end up in some fucking food fight on Twitter and it's gonna waste your time.
Yeah.
And you're not gonna get closer to the truth that way.
Right.
You're gonna get distracted by like getting into it. The times I feel conflicted about having that predisposition is like I do think there's been like harassment of people and I see it on like Twitter and other places and like that fucks with me because I'm like I want to like come out and defend anybody who's been harassed just for looking into this stuff.
Yeah.
And then and by the way, I've faced it too and there's stuff I could tell you that would like I could tell you off air that's like it's fucking crazy as far as stuff that's come my way.
Really?
Yeah. So like that riles me up for sure, wanting to defend other people. But otherwise, man, it's just like it's a fool's errand trying to like get
Sure.
come after somebody.
Yeah, I agree.
So I try to stay like pretty Switzerland-esque.
It seems like you're the closest dude out there to this stuff. Like you're it seems like you have like flown closer to the sun than anybody.
That's not good, man. Icarus does not. Oh no.
Like the people you know and the circles you run in. Like I mean, I'm not even just talking about working for Peter Thiel, but like befriending Grush, and talking to all these secret aerospace people and getting all this stuff. Like your brain, you probably got more of this puzzle put together than most people.
I thank you, man.
I mean, 100% you have more of the puzzle than most people that are like in the media doing podcasts. But like even when it comes to behind the scenes shit.
Thank you for saying that. I don't know if that's a good spot to be in.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I'm like, if I'm one of these people, or if I'm one of these folks that are in charge of this stuff, I'm gonna be maybe trying to get to you or subvert you.
100%. I think I'm being fully tracked at all times. I think every conversation, every text, every interaction, and I think there are insights that I've probably come to that have been gleaned and like taken for, profit or whatever, and that's kind of weird. But like you gotta just kind of ignore it, put your blinders on, keep going. It used to get to me more, and now I just try to, I think if you have pure intentions and you're just trying to seek truth, then I think things end well for you karmically. But yeah, it's for sure it's a weird spot to be in. I think it is partially because like if somebody tells me something and then they say not to say it, like I respect relationships, like really, like I don't, if somebody is providing a is a source for something, like I don't fuck people over. So,
Right.
Like and even for, like I think in the microeconomics of like podcasting journalist world, it's like some of these people would like push their grandma in front of a moving taxi for a tip, for a story, and it's like I just don't do that shit. Like and then if that cuts against the truth, I'm just not going to air it. I'm not going to put it out, but I'll kind of walk away and not touch the fine china and be like, I kind of know what you're up to, but like I don't really want to.
What would you do if the CIA came to you, Jesse Michaels? We need to have a talk. We're going to tell you everything. We're going to give you access to everything, but you need to shut the fuck up. Or you need to just run with the stories that we gave you the green light
Here's
on.
the thing.
National security, Jesse.
I think that's a counterfactual. I don't think the CIA has everything. I don't think
Right.
the government has everything.
Right.
And I realize this might be slightly evading your question, but it's like genuinely, I think it's so important to emphasize for people. Like this is not a file that you can just get. The government has tons of data that like reality is not what it seems. They probably have metamaterial. There's probably some biologics. There's probably there's a lot of stuff where they like know reality is way weirder than what the average civilian does.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think that you would say this too. The closer you get to government circles, the more they're conspiratorial than the average citizen.
Yeah.
Like they're more conspiratorial. So they know that. Does that mean they have like an ontological worldview, a map of what the aliens are, what their intentions are, how many races there are, where they're from, whether they're interdimensional, extraterrestrial? Absolutely not. I think maybe you get into certain core circles and areas, they have better frameworks than people on the civil side do.
What if it was Battelle that came to you, Jesse Michaels? We need to have a talk, brother. We're gonna fund your podcast. $5 million a year, subsidized by Battelle.
No way. I would never get like funded if the funding involves like steering the content. Like no.
Yeah.
If it's like educational and like, you know, in order to like tell the truth about something, and there was some like public-private partnership, I would entertain it, especially if I could be open to that to the public and I wasn't like lying about that. Yeah, for sure. Like I don't think like everybody in government's like a bad person or like it's not a monolith.
Right, for sure.
But yeah, no, I wouldn't do some like intentional limited hangout thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be an interesting bridge to cross if the opportunity ever presented itself. I always think about that.
Is that your pitch, Danny?
Yeah.
you're like, just hit me up. That's so funny.
Yeah, would it matter? Because I mean, most people online already think that we're CIA.
I know,
already,
dude.
so.
It's exactly. Half the people are like, he's a spook and he's funded by Peter Thiel and blah blah blah.
Yeah,
like,
right. Yeah, you got an uphill battle.
That's an uphill battle for sure. And like, I don't know. I always just like, okay, don't trust anything I'm saying. Like, fine. And then like the people who do, like, you're gonna learn a lot of crazy shit. Like, cause I'm revealing like really crazy shit, stuff that I came to on my own. And honestly, I put a lot of money. Like the opportunity cost involved in like going after UFOs. Like I managed like 9 figures of capital. Like I was investing a lot of money in a way that would have been like really good for my future. If I wanted like a chill, good life, like I had that like set up. Like I easily could have kept going on the path I was going on, do some conventional venture fund, you know, have fucking cocktails at happy hour in LA, go to the fucking Beverly Hills Hotel and go to like I could have done that, and I decided to go like a way more masochistic route. So it's fine, like you can call me whatever, but like trust me, it's not fucking that.
Yeah, how do you have time to do the investing stuff anymore?
I honestly don't do that much of it anymore. It's like it's like most of what we've done, like I'm managing up on, you know, like existing investments and just making sure they're going well, and I'm like in touch with the, you know, the fund managers that I've sourced as well as the companies themselves. And then occasionally if something jumps the bar and feels like a no-brainer, I'll do diligence on like, you know, an early stage thing where it's more qualitative and not quantitative analysis, and I'll do a deal. But it's like I was deploying much more money 3 years ago than I am now. So it's just slowed down.
Right. What is the absolute spookiest, darkest, sinister theory about what these things are that you've heard that you may not believe, but that you've heard that you think may have some little bit of merit? Like the one that you don't want to be true.
I can't say it.
Really?
Yeah, it's too dark. Yeah, it's really fun.
You can't say it because you'd be betraying somebody, or because you just don't.
Bad factions that are demonic. And then what are the demonic things doing? It's like maybe they're mining our attention. You know, like Robert Monroe, who studied consciousness, and you know, Virginia has this institute, you know, that he started. Like he had this concept of loosh, and so maybe there's stuff like that going on where like when you're in a zombie state, where does your consciousness go? Maybe that's sort of like a mining process. But then you look at like, you know, scapegoating cycles, like pagan scapegoating cycles, and like I don't know, you get into weird territory, and like it's hard to. I don't know what the darkest, you know, theory is, but I think the good ones are like don't interfere as much with you, and you're more like you're ascending to their level, and it's like a two-way bilateral connection where like one of my favorite quotes is the world is full of magical things patiently waiting for our wits to grow sharper. And it's like there's if you can like increase your own, you know, kind of spiritual sense and your knowledge, and you can increase the purity of your intention, I think you get closer to truth around a lot of these things. And I think this idea, this bifurcation, this idea that it's just academic rote knowledge that you have to learn, and then this kind of, you know, spiritual sense, like that's totally different. Like your own, you know, moral development as a person. I think they go hand in hand. And I think the more you do that, the more you have synchronicities, the more you get in touch, you feel this sort of angelic guidance in your life, the more you feel protected, and so I think whatever's good is like this kind of non-interferent initiation process, and then the bad stuff, you know, I don't know, in the world in which these beings exist, they're probably behind a whole lot of human affairs, and they're probably stoking wars and causing violence and division, and then you have to ask why, and I don't know why.
Right. Well, I mean, why wouldn't they be like us, right? Why wouldn't there be good versions and bad versions?
Totally. Yeah, you have good and bad humans. Why, yeah. I agree with that.
Have you ever seen a UFO in real life?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I've seen them way before.
See, that's the thing that I'm kind of like on the fence about.
Sure.
because like me and you talk about this stuff all the time, but I don't know if I want to have any of these experiences.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if I want to actually encounter this kind of shit in real life. 'Cause I don't know how that would affect me.
I think that's totally valid, and I definitely don't want to have an abduction experience. Like, I actually
right.
everybody I interview who's had an abduction experience. My buddy from Yes Theory, Amar Kandil, who does a lot of the shows with me, I make him come with me because he's like this like positive energy, like protective energy bubble, and I'm like, I get spooked, I get freaked out. Even with Whitley, I was a little freaked out.
Dude,
like,
I've never been more terrified.
yeah, and he'll say stuff like, "Oh, people." He said it with you. I remember he said like people who are with me sometimes have like experiences, and I remember you're like,
I was like, I
"Oh,
don't want
yeah,
that.
yeah."
He's like, it might happen to
He
you.
was like,
Danny.
"Oh, stink."
Absolutely, it'll happen to you. I'm like, please no. Please
Yeah,
no.
yeah,
And he's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, I'll tell him not to.
Yeah. No, I think Annie Jacobson, when she wrote her great book, The Phenomenon.
Yes.
Also, I think she was talking to Jacques Vallée, and she was like, please, like, don't, I just don't want to get abducted. Like, I'll study this
She said
stuff,
that to
but
him?
yeah, once you start studying this stuff, the second you realize like a switch in your brain goes off and you're like, okay, this person's not crazy and they've been abducted. Like, this stuff's actually just real. Then it freaks you out because you're like, am I, So
Right.
I feel that on the abduct. I don't want to get abducted, man.
No, I don't want to ever see any of these things in my bedroom.
Same. But I do think there's a huge difference between that and like being inspired by some like cool craft in the sky. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's kind of chill.
Yeah.
I think and for me that was like a beautiful, like,
What kind
great
of
experience.
what did you see exactly?
Although I will say abduction experiences, I think over 50% are often described as positive. So, over 50% are positive, at least in the free Edgar Mitchell study. But
Oh, okay.
I saw.
Because Whitley's is a horror movie.
Yeah, I know, and a lot are, and a lot again. If it goes back to that like droid gray thing where it's like we do not fear, but then they're like bleeding everywhere, and they like put a little thing in you, and
Right.
and they black out, and it's like, oh god, that doesn't
Yeah.
sound good at all. My UFO experience. Well, I had two that like really stand out, and that are one was in Laurel Canyon, and I talked about this on Julian Dory's podcast as
Yeah.
well, where it looked like a school bus or something. Like, it was like nothing like prosaically that I ever see. And so that's why I'll call it a UFO. I don't know, if it could have been aerospace, but it was hovering above the treetops at like, 40, 50 feet. And it was going across the treetops. And then the woman I was with, she said that she saw the thing like descend down like across the treetops in Laurel Canyon. I didn't see that. But what I saw was like, it was like this like kind of tesseract, like rectangle shaped, like school bus like thing that like I've just never seen before ever, and was so weird. And the way it came about was also weird too, because aliens had just come up in our discussion. So it was like one of us was like, do you believe in aliens? And like, and then at some point I was like, yeah, I'm kind of super into aliens actually. I think it's really interesting. And then I was like, I'd be interested to meet an alien. And then she goes, it'll come when you least expect it. And this is the weirdest part of the story. Is we walk by a guy has a metal detector, and it's like sunset, a little after sunset or sunset in Laurel Canyon. And it's like, why does he have a metal detector? He's like looking for something, and it says it'll come she said it'll come when you stop looking for it. And he's like looking for something. It's a little weird.
Yeah.
And that could be, again, me noticing too many patterns. But
Yeah.
like, then we walk and we just see this little clearing, and then the thing goes over.
What color was it?
It was gray metallic, and it was like, seemed like, I don't know, it wasn't making like enough noise where like the amount of weight that it was carrying, like you'd expect like an absurd amount of noise.
Yeah.
Like Apache level, like 10 Apache
Yeah.
level, So super, super strange. And it was around a time in my life where I was experiencing a lot of kind of like interesting synchronicities, and like things would kind of pop into, that was when I was around the time when I met Diana Pasulka actually. And like I started to kind of take more of a dive down the rabbit hole. And the other time I was doing holotropic breath work in Silver Lake with a friend who's, I won't out him, but he's a prominent investor who's like as rational as it gets. Like, he's actually really interested in like philosophy and academic science and stuff, and like the way he'd describe his worldview is like the natural philosophers like David Hume. He's super into Noam Chomsky. Like, he couldn't be more like the material world is what it is. Like, he's kind of like a material world, like a materialist atheist, And we had just gone surfing, and then we're back at his spot in Silver Lake, and I wanted to teach him holotropic breath work, which is, I love holotropic, it's the best. and we're doing it, and he kind of like 5 minutes in, like your hands can kind of clam up. It's like a common
Yep,
thing, and
yep.
like you get into like an interesting state, and all of a sudden he looks up. He's like, "What is that?" Oh my god! 2 metallic orbs, like one above him, one above me. They look like they're way too high to be, prosaic aircraft. I wouldn't be able to tell you like what, 60,000, 80,000, but like they were high up and they were like bobbing, like hovering. And this is so funny. Like initially he goes, what? I go, what the fuck do you think those things are? And he goes, that must be one of those like deep black, Lockheed crafts or whatever. And I'm like, interesting. And then a second later he goes, dude, those are not like of Earth.
How long ago was this?
This was 2020.
2020.
Yeah. This is either that was either the Laurel Canyon one was 2020. That was either 2020 or 2021.
Okay.
Either late 2020 or early 2021. Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting.
The only thing I've ever seen was with Chris Bledsoe.
So you saw a UFO.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it
Or
was.
you don't think it was
noth-
UFO,
It was
okay.
nothing like that. It was just like a ball of light.
Okay.
Like the stuff that he summons.
And he was trying to do it
Yeah,
when
he
you
was
were with
trying to
him.
do it. Yeah, he was praying.
And do you, I don't know, like, okay, gun to your head, you're wrong if you're wrong and you die.
Okay.
Would you say that was like human aircraft or prosaically explained ball lightning or whatever, or like some kind of celestial, like otherworldly thing?
I would say if I had a gun to my head, my best guess would be that it's some sort of natural phenomenon that happens in the atmosphere that I just don't notice because I don't stare at the sky enough.
Yep.
Because me and Steven were out there for 2 hours trying to find something with
Okay.
him praying to the heavens, and then we saw this thing. It was definitely not an airplane.
Yep.
I know it wasn't an airplane.
What it looked like?
We have a video of it. It was it came off of the horizon. It was like a little ball of light. Came up off the horizon where the water met the air, and it came up, started going this way, then got really, really bright, then got really, really dim, and then just fizzled out.
So how would you explain that from a scientific perspective?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Ball
Yeah.
lightning, something like that, like ball lightning, some sort of atmospheric anomaly.
Yeah. But
that-
was there anything that would, cause ball lightning?
I had
at
no
the
idea.
time?
I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know the science behind it, but
Yeah.
like if I was to, I know it was not an airplane.
Yeah.
And the way it was moving was definitely showed that it wasn't an airplane because we
Yeah.
saw airplanes that were flying. There
Yeah.
was airplanes flying off the beach or off the ocean onto land to land in Tampa Airport, and they had navigation lights flashing and stuff like that. They were obviously following a specific flight pattern, and this thing was not doing that. It didn't have the flashing lights. It got brighter, dimmer, fizzled out to nothing. Came up there. It is.
Wow.
Came off the atmosphere.
So this is the horizon of the.
Can you see the
ocean.
horizon
Yeah.
down there?
Yeah, I
Where it's
can.
like because it's so dark. It's hard to
Yeah.
see
Do it
it.
one more time.
It's in North Carolina.
No, this is here.
Oh, here.
There it is.
Oh, there's something right on the water. Right on the water.
Whoa.
Thank you. That's what we're looking for. If you could flash for us.
That's an airplane on the top. That's not.
I'm getting it. Right there.
Now it
It's
starts
still
going
in
to
the
the
camera.
right.
Whoa.
It's still in here.
And now another one above it. See?
Yeah, and it's zigzagging.
That one fizzles out. Look at this one on the left. Look at this one. Look how bright it's getting.
Whoa.
Here, someone needs to look through this. It's very bright. Thank you.
Wow.
Oh, you see it? It's right there. You see it?
That's an orb.
That is definitely an orb. I'm tracking it here. Do you want to look?
Yeah.
And then it fizzled out to nothing.
Let me find out.
Yeah. Faded in and faded out.
They were seeing it with the naked eye. I didn't see it until I put it in his little psionic camera thing that sees in like the dark. But like maybe it's something to do with that camera, but I don't know. Also, they were seeing it with their naked eye. But like I don't know. How do you explain that? I don't know. I got to talk to somebody who knows
Do it one more
about
time.
like this stuff. I mean, I don't know.
Do you
See how it comes off of the horizon like that though?
Right on
That's
the
crazy.
water.
Yeah, it is
Do that
crazy.
again, Steve.
Yeah, because is that water?
Thank you,
Rewind, that's
thank
water.
you.
Yeah.
Go to the very beginning.
If you could
Yeah, so
flash
what is
for
Move the
us.
controller too so we can see
Do
the
it one more
horizon.
time.
Watch. Look at that. What?
Yeah.
There's something
Yeah.
right on the water.
Yeah.
And it was so far away, you know. It was like how far away would you say that was, Steve?
I think from our vantage point, the horizon is probably like 3 miles.
Yeah.
Maybe
Look how
more.
it starts going to the right too.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it kind of goes back. It kind of zigzag. Yeah, like what flies like that? I don't know. It's
I think there's definitely something to what he's doing. Like what he's doing is absolutely
I agree.
legit and real. I don't know how to explain it.
Do you sense interesting energy when you're around him? Like, do you just like
Yeah.
feel it?
Yeah,
Like,
I don't know what to attribute that to. I don't know whether to attribute that to whether I am just sort of being affected by the energy, and that's just a normal thing. Like it's just his vibe that he gives off.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just affecting me, like affecting my soul in a way where I'm like, I'm in it and I'm believing it in the moment. I'm like, oh my God, wow, this
Yeah.
is fucking blowing my mind. This
Yeah.
is real. What is this?
Yeah.
Or like I said, is this something that you could just go anywhere and stare at the sky all night long and see this stuff all the time?
That seemed anomalous to me at the very least. That doesn't seem like if you were to do some like meta study on like the probability of seeing that even in a 2-hour period where you're staring at the sky, extremely low.
Yeah.
What is that?
Right.
That's weird. Now I'm not saying that that's definitely a UFO, an angel, an orb. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I think it's worthy of investigation.
Yeah, and then like detractors would say that like maybe he set somebody up with a boat and a drone outside there, but like off the beach.
Do you
there,
get that vibe from him? I don't at all.
No, I
like,
don't.
I get. You know, maybe everybody in the UFO world, or a lot of people, are credulous and high on the openness scale. I don't. From my conversations with Chris Bledsoe, I think he's a good person.
Me too.
Yeah.
And also, he had no idea where we were going to dinner that night. We just went to. I told him a random restaurant I took him to on the beach. He didn't know where it was, and I said, or afterwards, I'm like, you want to go across to the beach and see if we can do this? And he's like, oh yeah, let's do it. I got my camera with
There you
me,
go.
and his daughter and his wife and his daughter and his wife were also there.
Yeah.
And he just did it.
Yeah, I don't think that's a hoax, man. I think
No,
there's
it's not.
something going on.
There's something going on, and the wildest thing is all these people that are attaching themselves to him, which
know.
is like the craziest thing.
Crazy people. Where dude, like, we're in like a Cold War with China. Why would we be spending those sorts of resources on a guy who's seeing orbs,
Yes.
in North Carolina outside his backyard, if it weren't something actually kind of profound and interesting? Mm-hmm. Like, why?
Right.
Because these
And
guys are
we're
like,
we're not just connecting dots here. Like this is like legitimate stuff.
yeah.
Like this stuff is all documented. That the
Oh, yeah.
people that are visiting him and befriending him.
Yeah, Jim Semivan is like very well respected at the CIA.
Yes.
Like, he's like pretty, I think, high up, and like he spent a lot of time with Chris Bledsoe.
Yeah.
I think they're good friends.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting.
That combined with the fact that that video
Mm-hmm.
is completely went unsearchable in an instant.
That's
on,
wild.
on YouTube.
That's weird.
And we're like, I was good. Like after that thing dropped, I would go every day. You probably do this, where I searched Chris Bledsoe on YouTube every day.
Yeah.
For like the first week, just to see where it was ranking. Right.
Uh-huh.
It was top for the first week. The day it dropped, you couldn't find it. You could go 1,000 pages deep and never find it. It was just 4 or 5 or 6 History Channel videos of him on the History Channel.
You want to know something funny?
Huh.
You could type in David Grush. To this day, I'm not to toot my own horn, but the video I did with him is the best video that he has
Oh, I agree.
online.
Yeah.
And like, you can't find it. You could type in David Grush on YouTube, and it's News Nation, Rogan, a bunch of other things, and my thing is unsearchable.
Yep.
And it in 5 days, or 6 days, got well over 2 million views, and then
Yeah.
it just got throttled. And everybody, I mean, I'm working with Yes Theory on it. They have 9 million subscribers on YouTube, and I'm showing them the stats, like the click-through rate and average view duration. They're like, we've never seen anything this high. Like what? Like
Yeah.
what the fuck? And like you watch it, and it's like very watchable.
Yes.
And it's just impossible. Here, we're going through right now. It's
Yeah.
like we're searching David with the C.
Is that it?
Yeah, but go to David Grusch. Have you seen it before though?
I don't know. Search. Go down. Look, there it is,
That
bro.
looks good.
We're
It-
back, baby.
It definitely wasn't. And like I have an email chain
Well,
with Google about
so do
where
I.
it wasn't. So like
Here's what they do,
I
though.
have the receipts that it was unsearchable.
This
before.
happened to my Whitley Strieber episode too,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
only for the first 2 weeks.
Okay.
After the first 2 weeks, they put it back.
Well,
Because you
also
get-
go on incognito. I do want to see if it's the same
Okay, do open up an
because
in-
you've seen the video.
open up an incognito browser.
Yeah, our new private window.
you
Yeah,
go.
whatever.
Go to
But
you-
you're saying that it can
Get
come
off.
back.
Get off
sometime?
Brave. Get off Brave. Go to Chrome. Yeah, sometimes what they'll do is they'll make it invisible on search for the first 2 weeks when it's going to get shared the most and go viral, catch traction the most. After the first 2 weeks, you're already posted your next video. Then they'll put it
Then it
back,
comes back.
so they can plausibly deny the fact that. it's
Okay,
missing.
so we're good now. We're number 2.
Now
But
type in Chris Bledsoe,
Yeah, let's do that.
which is all. It's been a year now, so it's not as relevant. But yeah, scroll down,
That's my boy Chris Ramsey
Yeah.
made an epic one.
keep going. Just go faster. You'll definitely notice it if it pops up. See, those history ones were the first ones to pop up last time.
And yours just nowhere to be found.
And you know, it's funny. There was even a guy who re-uploaded my full podcast on his channel with him reacting to it. That was popping up.
What?
Yeah.
Oh shoot, it's really good.
Yeah, that was the same with the Grush thing for me originally. It was like all these like analysis of the videos were ranking high. It's so crazy.
Now go back to the top, Steve.
So nuts, man. And yeah, yours was like the first big one.
Go back to the scroll at the very top. It's still the most viewed, I'm pretty sure. Go to the and
Yep.
get out of the search thing. See where it says filters on the far right?
Yeah.
Filtered by most viewed.
Yeah, it's,
View count.
probably yours.
Top no right.
Yeah, right.
View count. Yeah.
View count. 3.9.
Yeah, no, that's you.
Look,
yeah,
there,
yeah.
there, there.
NASA's Forbidden Alien
there it
Study.
is.
Wow.
Holy crap! Wow.
Wow. That's wild, man.
Isn't it
And
weird?
you have it in your tags and stuff. You have like
Oh,
Chris
of
Bledsoe and
course.
his name?
Yeah. No, like I said, it was the #1 search result for the first
Something
like
was
2
going
weeks.
on.
And
That's
then it just
so.
went
It's
black.
crazy to see mine number 2. 'cause
Yeah, right?
Well, dude, I swear to God.
No, I know.
it was
The guy at
unfindable.
YouTube
Yeah.
literally told me this.
Yeah, he told you that
Yes.
exactly. That mine like
Yes.
fell off a cliff
Yes.
views wise. Yeah,
And it
Something
went completely invisible.
went completely invisible.
Yeah.
And then Yes Theories, they say, okay, this is crazy. Yes Theories, they say it's the best stats they have on any video, and it's one of their lower. It's like in the lower 25% viewed videos. It only has 1.1 million views, which for them is or 1.2 or 1.1 million views, which for them is extremely low. Like they have like crazy high viewed stuff.
Yeah.
And the stats are like off the charts. So like they're also like super conspiratorial about that. And they're
Yeah.
like the most like kid friendly do-gooder, like they're like the best vibes. Like
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
not
yeah.
and like
They're
it's
not
like
breaking rules
They're
or
not
anything.
breaking
Yeah.
rules, and like when they're like, yeah, we're getting throttled, like I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. Some people are speculating that the Trump thing is gonna do like some sort of a trust bust on YouTube and force them to stop regulating this
Well-
stuff so much and stomping on content.
Well, dude, Trump made that like misinformation is bullshit. Like, you know, it's like this like speech or whatever. Like
Yeah.
right when he got elected, and I loved it, to be honest. Misinformation is so condescending.
Yes.
Who is the arbiter of misinformation? Like, why do you decide? You're so wrong. You've proven to be so
Yeah.
incompetent in the context of the pandemic and COVID
Yeah.
and all these other things, like the history of American false flags. Why are you the arbiter? Well, like, why
Yes.
BBC Trusted News Initiative, CNN, you can say what is misinformation. You don't think for yourself. Like, it's ridiculous. So let everything out and let people decide.
Yeah.
Let people decide what they think is bullshit and what they think is real.
Yeah. No, the Mike Ben stuff really illuminates all that disinformation,
Oh, yeah.
misinformation stuff, and
Oh,
how
yeah.
they go to like other countries and like force them to regulate stuff, and they basically hold the corporations, like they pit them against like maintaining their monopolies overseas. Like, oh, okay, well if you're gonna censor this stuff, we'll let you keep your monopoly in Europe, right?
Yes.
Like, dude, that stuff is crazy.
It's
to me.
crazy. And speaking of that in the context of the UFO topic, I should say the USAID funded The Intercept. We know that for sure. Ken Klippenstein came out with basically leaked Dave Grush's medical records, and that is what like kind of marginalized Grush for a while. I mean, I think most people don't really realize it's bullshit. I mean, the dude like was an Afghanistan combat veteran, was deployed, and like his buddy like died next to him, was like mortared and stuff. Like it's just fucked up. Like and that's what they're and like so like, you know, when he would drink occasionally, he would like go through that. He would re-simulate those feelings for him. And Ken Klippenstein, who's working for a USAID funded publication, is leaking these medical records right after Grush testifies before Congress to discredit him. It's just weird, man.
Yeah, that is super fucking.
Feels really coordinated.
God, man. Yeah, the USAID thing is like such a nuclear bomb for the government, man.
Yeah.
Like that stuff is just bananas, and how it's like you can't escape it. It's too big. It's too big to squash.
We've just been living in managed reality
Yeah.
for decades.
Yeah. Spending $2 billion or how many billions of dollars on trans operas in the Ukraine and like all this stupid stuff they're funding everywhere. Like,
Yeah.
God damn, Ian Carroll's been doing a great job of talking about this stuff. He does like crazy deep dives
Yeah,
on
he's
USAID
cool.
and all this stuff. He's awesome.
Yeah, he's dope.
Have you are you familiar with like the history of Google and Sergey Brin and like Google being incubated by the CIA and NSA?
You were telling me some stuff here. I mean, I know that Menex, right, was like the DARPA search engine that kind of
Yes.
dovetailed with Google, but
Yep.
like, otherwise I don't. You tell me. I'm
Yeah,
curious.
so no, there's a I don't know much about it other than this like crazy article I read on it recently about this guy. I forget the guy's name. It was on Substack, I think, and he wrote he did like a super deep dive, and it's all connected to Sergey at Stanford and the guy that he was working under were literally funded and visited the whole time and incubated by CIA and NSA people that were visiting him and like checking in on him with the search, with the PageRank system and all this stuff.
Whoa.
And giving him stuff that was created by DARPA. Like it's all connected to DARPA and SAIC and like all this crazy military industrial complex
Well,
stuff.
SAIC was, based in Palo Alto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like it's so like it basically
Where'd you learn all this?
from the stuff that I read.
Wow.
And the implications of it is that Google was quite literally funded and created by the CIA and DARPA.
Yeah.
So what does that even mean? Like how do you like
Well, like Oracle's first contract was with the CIA.
Yes.
And like I do think a lot of this stuff gets created in the black.
right?
And
Well,
then
so
it gets like
it's Palantir too, right? Like like I understand that. I understand why you would want to create companies that you're literally you're doing it in reverse. Instead of creating a company and finding clients, you're finding a hole, or you're finding a need that the government has, a government who has billions of dollars in resources to invest in this stuff. Find a way to do it better, and you're basically creating a company that already has a built-in client, the U.S. government, which is like essentially what Palantir is, right? Or what Elon's doing with SpaceX.
I think it's what it ended up becoming. I think originally it was like around like some of the fraud detection stuff they were
Yeah.
doing at PayPal or whatever dovetailed with
Oh,
the
really?
software
Okay.
for Palantir, and
Okay.
then I think the CIA became
Yeah.
one of the first customers.
right.
But I don't think it was created in conjunction with.
Right, but I'm just saying, if it was me and
Yeah.
if I was one of these guys that was creating one of these crazy companies, right, that was doing surveillance and whatever the hell it does, like I would say, we have a huge opportunity to make millions of dollars off the government doing this stuff because we can do it better than they can do it.
Right.
I think if you even had guys in here like Andrew Bustamante who have literally said Palantir is way better than all the stuff that we have at CIA. Like we use Palantir,
Right,
like
right.
it's
Right.
it works way better.
Right.
So like
right.
it's a great business proposition
Yeah,
to create
yeah,
a company
yeah.
like that.
Yep.
But like find out who wrote that article about Google. I think the title of it was how Google made, or no, it was how the CIA created Google.
Interesting.
And it's on Substack. I want to give this guy credit.
There's while you're looking that up, there was a project at DARPA called LifeLog, and it was like, like networking all these people and like their friends and like their friend networks. And I think it was shut down in 2003 or 4, right before Facebook started. So I do find that kind of interesting too. But I have no idea if there's a connection there.
Yeah.
But it is.
No, this isn't it, Steve. It's you're gonna have to type in. Did you type in Substack after? Oh yeah, you did. Keep going.
I mean, the other,
Medium. That's it right there.
Medium.
Yeah, that's it. I'm sorry, I messed up. This is it.
Oh.
You can close that bottom thing, and you'll be able to see who it's by. Let's at least credit the author. How the CIA Made Google by Nafiz Ahmed. Nafiz Ahmed. Dude, this is mind blowing. There's two articles, like a series of them.
I can't wait to read this.
But it's great, man.
Interesting.
Blew my mind.
Wow. Well, I always found it interesting. Like they were kind of, I mean, it makes total sense, especially with the Snowden stuff in 2013, like Prism, Bull Run, all that stuff came out, and it's clear that the NSA just had like backdoors into like all of these big
Yeah.
tech companies. And then the NSA had a program, I think at the time, called Heartbeat, which is like you can like basically query anybody's data or
Yeah.
whatever, like in like this like centralized database repository. So
Yeah.
we know that was a thing at the very least. But I found it interesting when Google, like as part of Project Maven, like wouldn't work with the US government, and then simultaneously they were going into China like that same year. And so there's like something like
Yeah.
I'm like, how coordinated is this stuff? And if it is coordinated, is it at
Was-
the
are you talking about the thing where recently, right, where Google came out publicly and said that we're not going to work with the U.S. government to it was some sort of like a part of some war. They basically came
This
out
was
publicly.
2017.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. 2017, 2018.
Yeah, this was like a big public thing that they said.
Interesting. Well, they were the biggest donors to Kamala.
Yes.
Number one donor.
Yeah, man.
Corporate donor. So
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. So it's funny, like we both, are so dependent on YouTube, and I'm like, it does make me occasionally nervous, because it's like, it does. I'm grateful to Elon Musk, man.
So was who else was
yeah.
a huge donator to Kamala was what's his name? Alex Karp. You know who that is?
Now, Alex Karp was
The CEO
of Palantir.
Of Palantir, yeah.
That's really interesting.
Really interesting.
That I wouldn't suspect that. I
read that. I read there's a New York Times piece that came out on him.
Really?
Recently.
That's
Where
fascinating.
they're interviewing him about this stuff, and he's like,
He donated to Kamala.
Yeah, he was literally saying in there how he donated millions of dollars to the Democratic Party, and
He's always described himself as a like
left wing guy, right?
Yeah, he's like super into Hegel, and like
Yeah.
very like almost like a neo-Marxist or something.
Yeah.
And,
But
then
he's like-
but then
he
it's
grew up
also
with Peter, right? They're like really good friends. Like they've known each other forever since college.
from back in the day. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's Stanford Law, I believe.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So I
But he's
know that.
also
I had no
like
idea.
he doesn't have any sort of hesitation in working with the U.S. government to advance American supremacy, U.S. supremacy.
I think their like mission in many ways is like they want to protect the free world.
Yeah.
And I think they are responsible for a lot of big threats to the U.S. Going down, and I think
Yeah.
that's a pretty good thing. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I know there are a lot of conspiracies about them.
Oh,
but-
there's so many conspiracies, bro.
They're mostly, and that's what the other people don't understand. It's like for me, they're mostly a black box. Like I don't
Yeah,
really like
right.
interact with them
Right,
or know
right.
too much. But
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever
I
heard,
mean, I've met like
have you heard of Whitney Webb?
Oh yeah.
She goes deep on the
I
on the-
know.
on the Peter
Well,
Thiel stuff.
She's like, dude, she like frustrates me because she's clearly really smart and
Yeah.
showing a ton of courage
Yeah.
in like going deeper on like Epstein networks than like
Yeah.
anybody else, which is
Right.
epic. And then now she's like, and now it's all Peter and Palantir or whatever. It's like,
Right.
no, it's not. And your book
Right.
is so convoluted. It's almost like if you wanted a psyop to throw people off the trail for Epstein, it would be that book. Like it's so complicated. Again, I don't want to
Yeah.
it's an amazing.
I haven't
work.
read it yet.
I've tried to read it.
Okay.
And it does. She makes all sorts of amazing connections. It's like 1,000 pages long. So
Yeah.
it's just crazy.
Yeah.
And she's doing an amazing service, I think. And so like very net positive Whitney Webb, but like there's certain areas where like it feels like she's just anti like anybody who's rich and powerful, like anybody. Like she's anti-Elon, with
Yes.
all the stuff he's doing around free speech,
Right.
and the USAID and rooting them out of our institutions. Like, who do you want to do that? You need somebody that powerful to do that.
Yes.
So who's like ultimately like politics like is where like the battleground takes place, and like it's a power game.
Yes.
And you need the people who are the most powerful, like who probably made certain expedient alliances to get to where they are.
Yeah.
Like doing things to like get anything done.
Yeah.
And I feel like she's super like
Cynical.
if you are not so cynical, and if you are not like you don't pass some like crazy purity litmus test, you are the devil or whatever.
Right.
And like I would just say like look, like maybe everybody at the elite strata or whatever has like had to at times make unholy alliances.
Right.
But like whose side are you on? And I think like some real good is being done in this like new Trump admin. And
Yeah, me too.
with Elon and Tulsi and like just Tulsi and RFK, like I mean,
Yeah.
those two specifically, like really, I think were on the side of truth when it was unpopular, specifically RFK Jr. I mean, I love that guy. I think he's epic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of Whitney Webb's, but I do think she could just be so like ideologically purist at times.
Totally.
But yeah, I'm glad she exists.
Yeah. She definitely does good work. But like, yeah, that stuff the rabbit holes are never ending when it comes to that stuff. If you don't like, you have to follow. Like, it's not black and white, right? Like, you can't just. I guess you can. You can shred anybody you want for anything and find out every bad thing that somebody has done. But like, you gotta recognize like the net positive that people are doing as well.
100%. Anybody at a certain level of power, unless it's like the Cirque du Soleil dude who like was like started from like with a homeless troupe of circus people, or like the Patagonia founder. You like occasionally you'll meet somebody where it's like you got nothing.
Exactly.
But like anybody in the elite world of business, politics, government.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't name too many people where it's like there aren't certain things that you had to do, and so it's human nature.
It is unfortunately there's a political game that has to be played to get shit done in Washington. Like, you have to play that fucking game. There's no way around it.
Totally. And I don't want to fucking do. I mean, that's,
I don't want to do that either.
Shitty.
Yeah, fuck no.
It's being in politics now. Like, I grew up actually being like, maybe I'd want to be in politics when I was really little. I was like, maybe I'm interested in politics. It'd be cool. And then now I'm like, it's a selector for the worst people. Just the worst, like just sellouts, like just spineless, like, the people who are just obsessed with optics. And it sucks.
It's weird shit.
It's weird shit for sure.
Well, dude, thank you for doing this, brother. We almost did 4 hours. Wow. What time is it? What time you're playing? Okay, yeah, we gotta end it right now.
Okay,
you gotta go.
I gotta go.
Jesse Michaels, thank you, brother. That was fucking amazing.
Danny, this was epic, bro. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
bro.
man. American Alchemy on YouTube, aka Jesse Michaels. Where else?
American Alchemy on YouTube, and then go to whop.com, WHOP.com/Jesse Michaels, Michaels with no A, and that's like my Patreon equivalent. And we're gonna do epic debates there, and it's gonna be really fun. We're gonna host all sorts of awesome conversations, and that's where you get like some really good stuff.
We'll link it all for everybody.
You're the best. Yeah,
there we go.
Exclusive content, and then on YouTube as well under Jesse Michaels.
Amazing. Thank you, brother. We'll
Appreciate
do it. We gotta do it again.
Hey, I'm down
next time.
anytime.
I'll bring you down when there's waves.
Let's go. Yeah, we gotta surf, dude. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Later.
What's up, Jesse Michaels?
What's up, Danny Jones?
Like I just said to you, bro, you're gonna have to pull me back into the believer. Make me a believer again, because the more I learn about UFOs, the more I am just out on this topic lately.
That's understandable, and I'm not here to bring you back. I'm not an evangelist. I do think...
Damn it.
I'm sorry. I do think if the question is the topic worthy of further investigation, and is there something very interesting at the bottom of all of this, you get to the final room, is there something interesting going on? My answer would be I think yes. But I don't want to evangelize. I think in many ways interest in UFOs is maladaptive and a distraction for a lot of people, and doesn't make sense. So.
Yes. There's a lot of you got to cut through, bro. Like, not just if you want to talk about like PSYOP stuff, like sure, there's a lot of stuff you got to cut through with that. But then there's a whole nother layer of people monetizing this. There's a business, right?
Yep.
Like we're doing a podcast in a spaceship about UFOs because my audience loves UFOs and I'm gonna make money talking about UFOs. Half the books on that shelf are about fucking UFOs. So it's a huge business too.
Yep.
Which muddies the water even more.
Yeah, it totally muddies the water, and it's a weird dynamic. And I think when you have a topic that's kind of pointing at the sacred, it might be the tip of the iceberg. It's not the rest of the iceberg. Like, it's just an unidentified flying object is not necessarily what you're going for. I think a lot of people that are into it are like ultimately meaning seekers, and they want like they want to understand the reality of religion. They want to understand metaphysics. And so I think UFOs are just a foray. They're just one kind of route in. But I think combining that with money is a very weird thing. I mean, then it's like sort of the modern Catholic indulgences or something. It doesn't really work.
Right. Yeah, totally, man. And we were just talking before we started rolling about that movie, The Adjustment Bureau. And there's some crazy people, like some deep, dark, secretive people in this whole UFO world that aren't public. That I guess we can talk about the guy, right? Like he's fully. The reason I'm scared to talk about this guy, is because my podcast today with Chris Bledsoe, completely got nuked off YouTube.
Yeah, should we tell this story? Because you told me some really interesting stuff on a phone call.
I did?
Yeah.
What did I tell you?
Well, you said that.
You can say, I don't care.
Okay, cool. You said that the views were like, it was like doing 50K a day.
Oh, yes.
And then it cuts off.
Yeah.
You speak to some rep at Google, and they're like, we don't know what the hell happened here. It doesn't make any sense given the click-through rate, average view duration, which should basically define the video's performance. He goes, the one other time I've seen this is with Jesse's David Grush video.
Exactly.
Performance fell off a cliff.
Yep.
So.
And he said that my video with Bledsoe and your video with Grush, neither of them broke any YouTube rules or had any internal red flags that he was able to see.
Yep.
And he goes, whenever this happens, which has happened one other time recently with David Grush, it's basically the floor above me that I have no access to.
Yep.
Something above my head that I don't know what the hell's going on. So what the hell is going on? Why are they doing this? Erasing podcasts with people who talk about getting abducted by aliens off of the internet. I feel like they have way bigger fish to fry.
You would think. I don't know. There's something very interesting about Chris Bledsoe's story. It's like, why is, Jim Semivan, very high up at the CIA, why is he showing up at Chris Bledsoe's, place in Fayetteville, North Carolina, when he's, starts to kind of attract UFOs, he talks to the lady or whatever, you know the whole story.
Yeah.
He's definitely attracted the attention of some very interesting people. We were just talking about, Tim Taylor.
Yes,
who
that's the guy.
I would always mention pseudonymously. He was written about in this great book by Diana Pasulka, religious studies professor, called American Cosmic, and then he was kind of doxxed by Chris Bledsoe on your show, actually.
Right,
So-
which I thought that might have been the reason that video got completely blasted off the face of YouTube because of him talking about him. Right, because if I'm that guy, and I have all these connections that he allegedly has, I could probably make a call or send an email to somebody at YouTube being like, nuke this thing.
Totally. Yeah, well, that's what, and Bledsoe even says in the story that Tim Taylor gives him a whole brief about UFOs, and then he says, you can't send this to anybody. And then he sends the email or something to his wife or somebody very close, and immediately gets a call from Tim being like,
knowing that he forwarded it.
Yeah, like you f***ed up, And so, who knows if that's like a test and they're sort of being psyoped or, I don't know. I think even Bledsoe thinks that, maybe he was being messed with initially when he sort of entered his life. And even when I think he was giving him a tour of Kennedy Space Center.
Oh, yeah. He said when you walk through the security, when you walk past the security tower, he goes, just play a song in your head.
Yeah, so they can't access your thoughts.
So they can't access your thoughts, right.
Yeah.
And I asked him, what?
Yeah.
I'm like, who's in there?
Yeah.
And he was he didn't know. He's like, mind readers. I don't know if they're aliens or humans, but they read your minds.
Yeah.
And then he also said some that I'm like, I don't even know if I want to say on camera, but he
say it, Danny.
He told me some stuff. Okay, essentially, I'll dumb it down so it's not too technical, but he basically told me that this fella showed him a real life Men in Black neuralizer.
No way.
That wipes your memory.
No way.
This is what he told me.
How can you know
And
if it's a neuralizer?
We actually cut the segment out of the podcast because I was like, there's no way I'm putting this on the podcast. It was like a 10-minute chunk of that Bledsoe podcast where he explains everything about it, how it works, where they got it from.
No way.
Yeah, bro.
Why didn't they neuralize him after they described the whole neuralizer? That would seem like...
You would think they would want to do that, right?
Yeah.
But that is essentially is one of the explanation for the missing time stuff. And he had another story about missing time where they were walking through a forest.
Yep.
I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but they were walking. Him and Tim were walking through a forest with somebody looking for something, and then all of a sudden, they started over.
Whoa.
They almost started back to where they were an hour ago with in an instant. Almost it was like a loop. They looped through time or something.
It's fascinating.
Weird.
I don't know. Well, I just we were talking earlier about I did a piece on this guy Thomas Townsend Brown, who I think is just a fascinating character.
One of the best documentaries I've ever seen.
Thank you, man.
It was incredible.
Appreciate that. Yeah, well, he's amazing. He's I think like a forgotten hero in American history. I think he made all sorts of breakthroughs in the world of gravity. But in general relativity, gravity and time are related. So the kind of subplot of his whole biography, it's a great biography called The Man Who Mastered Gravity by a guy named Paul Shatzkin. Recommend you all read it. The subplot is that he's obsessed with time travel. And he talks about time travel constantly with his wife, Josephine, his daughter, Linda. And here's where it gets really weird. Apparently, Tim Taylor told Chris Bledsoe that he was part of a secret time travel group in Nassau in the Bahamas. And the president of that group was Thomas Townsend Brown. Now, I would think that was I would dismiss that out of hand. I would be like, that's sort of, madness. But I know from my own research, independent research on Thomas Townsend Brown, he spent a ton of time in Nassau in the Bahamas. And he was just extremely interested in time travel. And he was spending a lot of time with this guy, William Stevenson, who was James Bond's super spy. He was the inspiration for James Bond. He was Winston Churchill's super spy. But he was, Ian Fleming's inspiration for James Bond. He's just like fascinating kind of, he's, coordinating a lot with Wild Bill Donovan, early OSS, or late OSS, early CIA, involved in the formation of the CIA. Was working out of the Rockefeller Center in New York and kind of calling a lot of interesting shots as, almost part of like a shadow government, if you will. So he's close with Thomas Townsend Brown. They're in the Bahamas a lot. Mm-hmm. And then you have, Ryan Bledsoe saying that Tim Taylor told his father that he's part of this secret time travel group with Thomas Townsend Brown. Just very, very interesting. And then we were talking about this before the show. You said, that Tim Taylor told Chris Bledsoe that the Adjustment Bureau was like,
yes,
his life or whatever. And that's all about like changing one little variable. Like, it's like if I were to freeze this room and like, I don't know, move your mic like a little bit,
right,
and you get this butterfly effect style multiplicative effect down the line or whatever of like, changing timelines. It's madness. It sounds kind of crazy.
Complete fucking madness.
Yeah,
science fiction.
It is. It's sci-fi, and I'm not proposing that that's a real thing, but it is fascinating that there are some connections there. And then the final connection I made is Townsend Brown's daughter is an amazing woman.
She was in the documentary, right?
She was in the documentary on the phone call, and her name's Linda Brown, but it was Linda Leach for a while. And she has an Amazon review on Tim Taylor's biography. Tim Taylor's biography is called Launch Fever, and I think he wrote it 2003, 2004.
Right.
And in 2012 or 13 or 14, like early, well before Diana Pasulka even pseudonymously published about Tim Taylor under the pseudonym Tyler in American Cosmic in 2018, Linda Leach is writing a review on Launch Fever, saying this is, wonderful homage to, the space program or whatever. So clearly there's a connection between Townsend Brown and Tim Taylor, which is, it's pretty interesting.
Wild,
yeah. Dude. Yeah. So you have this mid-century inventor who I think, at the very least, like we have an FBI file on Thomas Townsend Brown saying he was the lead radar scientist in the entire Navy. Mm-hmm. Like, this guy's a real guy. Mm-hmm. You can say he didn't crack anti-gravity, that's fine. I'm like totally open to that. Like, you have to think probabilistically around that. I have a lot of fucking evidence that he did. But say he didn't do that or whatever. He's like a very real guy, and he's talking about time travel constantly. And then there's this really interesting connection with a modern NASA mission controller. I don't know. I don't understand it.
Yeah. Going to the Adjustment Bureau comment that he made.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that there's a thing that happens to people, and I wouldn't know because I don't have the personal experience, but do you think it's possible there's something that happens to somebody or certain individuals when they have tons of super, super top secret information that they have and nobody else has, where they sort of feel like their life is, for lack of a better term, they're living the Da Vinci Code? And they sort of like fall into that, and they sort of like look through their entire life through that lens, right? Like I am living this movie, or like I am this superhero character because I hold these secrets that like literally would change the power balance of the world if I let them out.
Yeah.
I wonder what that does to your brain. You know what I mean?
I do wonder that as well. And then I wonder how much of it is like human clearance systems versus like, have you ever experienced synchronicities in your life? Like,
Oh, all the
things
time.
popping up,
All
showing
the
up, like
time.
really in really cool, interesting, fun way. So maybe there are people that are more tapped into that in sort of a weird way. You know?
Well, that's what this guy tries to do, right? He's trying to tap into this other thing. He's trying to get these downloads that she's in her new book. She talks about like all these. Diana Pasulka in her new, I forget the name of her new book. She taught in that one. She talks
Encounters.
about encounters. Yeah, it's great.
Awesome book.
Shout
out Diana Pasulka.
Shout out to Diana. All these protocols that he goes through every day by not drinking coffee.
Yep.
And like going outside.
Yep.
And getting sunlight and all this stuff in the morning and like trying to download some sort of cosmic shit so we can make more patents.
Yeah, it sounds so woo woo
so wild.
and wild, and like I don't know what to say about it. I think that's more how thinking works than the average
Sure.
person realizes. You know,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the transmission theory of consciousness. When you're daydreaming, you're not actively producing those thoughts, right? It's like you're like a receptacle for the thoughts. And so I think it's an important kind of epistemological question: is are we locally producing the content in our minds, or are we somehow downloading them from elsewhere?
Yeah, sure.
I think that is probably going to be proven by some sort of scientific model of the future. Right now, electromagnetism, as we know it, decays over and attenuates over space-time, so we don't have a good model for like how that transmission might occur.
Right.
Neutrino information transfer. But increasingly in vogue is this extended electrodynamics model, which NASA and not the DOE, the National Science Foundation and NASA just launched this podcast, and like Hal Puthoff and all these interesting like kind of figures in UFO world, but also with some pretty impressive bona fides just in science as well. You got a former Skunkworks guy, some Navy scientists.
Alrighty, fellas, it's time to talk about personal grooming, which is not just about looking good, it's about feeling good. Whether it's gearing up for a meeting, getting ready to go on a date, or just preparing for the day, the right tools make all the difference. Take care of your skin and skip the cuts and irritation. Meet the Beard and Balls bundle from Manscaped, your all-in-one grooming solution to keep you polished from head to toe, or more precisely, from beard to balls. And let's be real, no one wants to look like they just lost a